Some silences scream louder than words. They called her son broken, defective, a stain on pure bloodlines. But Isla Monroe saw something else in the 7-year-old boy who couldn't speak, a soul desperate to be heard, a heart aching for connection, and eyes that held more wisdom than any child should possess. She was nobody, a human made scrubbing floors in a world of supernatural power. He was everything, Damien Frost, the ruthless alpha billionaire whose empire stretched across 3 states, whose word was law, whose cold exterior hid a father's desperate love. When Isla used her hands to speak the language the boy's own mother had refused to learn, everything changed. One conversation, one moment of understanding, one choice that would shatter every rule of the shifter world. Because loving an alpha comes with a price. And sometimes, that price is your humanity itself. In a world where being different means being hunted, where transformed shifters are treated like filth, and where a bitter ex-wife will destroy anyone who threatens her fortune, Isla will have to decide. Stay human and lose the family she's found, or sacrifice everything she is for the love that saved her. This is not just a love story. This is a war for belonging. And it starts with a child's silent tears. Chapter 1. The Sound of Silence. The crystal chandelier above Isla Monroe's had cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. She knew this because she'd overheard the interior designer discussing it with Mrs. Chun, the head housekeeper, during her first week at the Frost estate. That had been 4 months ago. 4 months of scrubbing Italian marble until her knees ached. For months of polishing mahogany banisters that gleamed like dark mirrors. 4 months of making herself invisible in a world where she didn't belong. The morning sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 3rd-floor corridor, catching dust motes in its golden light. Isla wrung out her cleaning cloth, the sharp scent of lemon disinfectant burning her nostrils. Her lower back throbbed with a dull, familiar ache. She was only 24, but some days she felt ancient. The shifter world. She'd known about it since she was 8 years old, when Miss Helena, the elderly wolf shifter who ran the group home, had sat her down and explained why some of the children who came through their doors had eyes that glowed in the dark, why some healed impossibly fast, why some whispered about the moon like it was a living thing. "You're human, child," Miss Helena had said, her weather hand gentle on Isla's shoulder. "In their world, that makes you pray. Learn their customs. Show respect. Keep your eyes down and your voice soft. It's the only way to survive among predators." Isla had learned. She'd learned which sense meant dominance, which postures meant submission. She'd learned to read the subtle hierarchies in every room, to recognize the dangerous ones by the way others deferred to them. She'd learned American Sign Language, too, because Miss Helena believed every child deserved to communicate, wolf, human, or otherwise. That knowledge had kept her safe. Until today, it seemed destined to keep her invisible. Isla stood, pressing one hand against her aching spine, and surveyed the hallway. Spotless. Perfect. Exactly as the Frost family demanded. She gathered her supplies, the bucket handle cold against her calloused palm, and moved toward the next section of her route. The playroom door stood ajar. Isla paused, her instincts prickling. She had strict instructions about this room. Everyone on staff did. Clean only when the young master is elsewhere. Do not engage. Do not acknowledge. Do not speak unless spoken to first. The rules came from Mrs. Chun, but everyone knew they originated higher up. From him. The alpha who ruled this house, and the vast territory beyond it with absolute authority. Damien Frost. Isla had seen him exactly 3 times in 4 months. Each time, the air had grown heavy with power, pressing against her skin until it was hard to breathe. Each time, her instincts had screamed at her to lower her gaze, to make herself small, to disappear. Alphas were dangerous. This one especially. A sound drifted through the gap in the door. Soft, broken, heartbreaking. Someone was crying. Isla's chest constricted. She recognized that particular quality of grief, the kind where someone tried desperately to muffle their sobs, to hide their pain even when they were alone. Her hand moved before her mind could stop it, pushing the door wider. The well-oiled hinges made no sound. The playroom was a showpiece. Expensive toys lined shelves in perfect rows, pristine and untouched. A reading corner featured plush, velvet cushions that looked like no one had ever sat on them. Everything screamed wealth and careful curation, but nothing suggested actual joy or play. Then she saw him. The boy was small for 7, tucked into the corner behind a towering bookshelf near the window. Dark hair fell across his forehead in waves that caught the light. His thin shoulders shook with silent sobs. Tears streamed down his pale cheeks, catching the sunlight and making them shimmer like diamonds. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, a deep, striking gray that seemed too old, too knowing, for such a young face. Those eyes held a loneliness so profound it made Isla's throat ache. Thorn Frost, the alpha son. The child the other maids whispered about in the servants' quarters when they thought no one was listening. Broken, they called him. Mute. A disgrace to the bloodline. A proof that even perfect genetics can produce failure. The words had made Isla's hands clench into fists every single time. She set down her bucket carefully, making no sudden movements. Miss Helena had taught her how to approach frightened creatures, human or animal. The principle was the same. Slow. Gentle. Non-threatening. Isla crossed the room with deliberate steps, giving Thorn time to notice her. Time to flee if he wanted. His head snapped up. Those gray eyes widened with shock. His hands flew to his face, scrubbing frantically at his tears, trying to erase the evidence of his pain. His mouth opened. Closed. No sound emerged. Isla's heart cracked a little more. She knelt in front of him, mindful of maintaining distance. Then, carefully, deliberately, she raised her hands and began to sign. Are you okay? The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Thorn froze completely. His gray eyes went huge in his small face. His breathing hitched, stopped, started again in a ragged gasp. For a long moment, he simply stared at her hands as if they had performed an impossible miracle. Then, slowly, hesitantly, his own small hands moved. Can you understand me? Isla's smile came without effort, warm and genuine. She nodded and signed back. I can. My name is Isla. What's yours? Thorn. His signs were careful, unpracticed, but clear enough. No one ever talks to me like this. They just move their mouths. Then they get mad when I don't answer. The casual cruelty of it hit Isla like a physical blow. She forced herself to keep her expression calm, supportive, even as fury burned hot in her chest. Well, I'm talking to you now, she signed, and I'll listen to whatever you want to say. Something shifted in Thorn's face. The wariness didn't disappear entirely, but it softened around the edges. He scooted forward slightly, closing the distance between them by mere inches. Why are you being nice to me? Why wouldn't I be nice to you? Isla tilted her head, genuinely puzzled. You seem like someone worth being nice to. Thorn's lower lip trembled. His hands moved jerkily, signs coming faster now, as if a dam had broken inside him. Everyone else thinks I'm broken. Mom says I'm defective. She doesn't come anymore. Dad is always busy. Too busy for me. I'm alone all the time. I hear things, people talking about me when they think I can't understand. They say I'm worthless. That I ruin everything. Isla wanted to gather this child into her arms and hold him until the pain faded. Instead, she kept her hands moving, kept the conversation flowing. Being different doesn't mean being broken, she signed, her movements firm and certain. It means being special in a way other people don't understand yet. And anyone who can't see that isn't worth your tears. Do you really think that? Thorn's eyes searched her face desperately, looking for any hint of deception. I know it, Isla signed back. I've worked with lots of children who needed to use their hands to talk. Every single one of them was special. Every single one deserved kindness and patience. That includes you. They talked for 20 minutes. Isla learned that Thorn loved books about ancient civilizations, but no one read to him anymore. She learned that his wolf had emerged when he was 5, smaller than most, but healthy and strong, and his mother had wept when she saw it. Not tears of joy, tears of disappointment. She learned that Thorn could hear everything in the house with his enhanced shifter senses, which meant he knew exactly what people said about him when they thought he couldn't understand. She learned that this 7-year-old child believed himself to be a burden his father was forced to carry out of duty, not love. "I can visit you during my breaks," Isla signed, watching hope flare bright in those gray eyes. "If you'd like that, we could talk more." Yes. Thorn's signs were enthusiastic now, his whole body engaged in the communication. "Please, yes." "Then I will," Isla promised, smiling. "I promise." She stood carefully, aware that she'd already been away from her duties far longer than was safe. Thorn scrambled to his feet, his expression brighter than it had been when she found him. He waved goodbye, the gesture childish and sweet, and Isla felt her heart squeeze painfully in her chest. She turned toward the door and froze. Damien Frost stood in the hallway just beyond the threshold. The Alpha himself, master of this house and the vast territories beyond it. He was tall, at least 6'4", with a presence that filled the space around him like a physical force. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders and lean, powerful frame. Dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite for all the emotion it displayed. But his eyes were the same storm gray as his son's, and they burned with an intensity that stole the breath from Isla's lungs. Those eyes fixed on her with the focus of a predator, and she felt the weight of his attention settle over her skin like a brand. How long had he been standing there? How much had he seen? Isla's pulse jumped into her throat. She lowered her gaze immediately. Every instinct Miss Helena had taught her, screaming at her to show submission, to acknowledge the dominant wolf. Her hands trembled as she reached for her cleaning bucket. "My office." His voice was deep, resonant, carrying an undertone of absolute command that made her body want to obey before her mind fully processed the words. "After your shift ends. 6 o'clock. Don't be late." It wasn't a request. Isla nodded, not trusting her voice, and watched as the Alpha turned and walked away. His footsteps were silent despite his size, predatory grace in every movement. She stood alone in the hallway, heart hammering against her ribs, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Behind her, through the still open door, she could feel Thorn's presence. His confusion, his fear that she might not come back. For his sake, she hoped whatever came next wouldn't separate them. The rest of her shift passed in a fog of anxiety and wild speculation. Isla cleaned rooms without seeing them, dusted furniture without remembering which sections she'd already covered. Her mind kept returning to those storm gray eyes, to the weight of the Alpha's stare, to the way her body had responded to his presence with a mixture of fear and something else she wouldn't name. When the clock finally struck 6, Isla's hands were shaking. She changed out of her cleaning uniform into a simple cotton dress, washed her face in the staff bathroom, and tried to calm her racing heart. Then, with her chin lifted and her shoulders squared, because she refused to meet whatever came next with cowering fear, she made her way to the Alpha's office on the first floor. The door was solid oak, imposing and final. Isla knocked twice, the sound sharp in the quiet hallway. "Enter." She turned the handle and stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The office was all dark wood and leather. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that looked ancient and expensive. A massive desk dominated the center of the space, its surface neat and organized. Behind that desk sat Damien Frost. The intensity of his focus hadn't diminished in the hours since she'd last seen him. If anything, it had grown sharper, more focused. Isla could smell him now, pine and winter storms and something wild that her human senses couldn't quite identify but recognized as dangerous. "Alpha. Dominant. Predator. Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Isla sat. She folded her hands in her lap to hide their trembling and waited for the Alpha to speak, to pass judgment, to decide her fate. The silence stretched between them, heavy and electric, until finally Damien leaned forward and fixed her with those burning gray eyes. "Tell me," he said, his voice low and dangerous and somehow gentle all at once, "how long have you been able to speak with my son? What happens when Isla reveals the truth? Will the Alpha see her as a threat, or as the answer to his prayers? And what price will she have to pay for giving Thorn what he needs most?" Chapter 2. Terms and Truths. Isla's throat felt tight as she met the Alpha's gaze. His question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications she didn't fully understand yet. She swallowed hard and forced herself to answer with steady honesty. "Today was the first time," she said quietly. "I heard him crying and went to check on him. I didn't know he could sign until he responded to me." Damien leaned back in his chair, his storm-gray eyes never leaving her face. The intensity of his stare made her skin prickle with awareness. She could smell him more strongly now in the enclosed space, pine forests after rain, ozone from lightning strikes, and something primal that made her hindbrain recognize him as an apex predator. "You learned American Sign Language," he said. It wasn't a question, but Isla nodded anyway. "At the group home where I grew up, Miss Helena, the woman who ran it, was a retired wolf shifter. She taught me about your world, how to stay safe around those with more power." Isla paused, then added carefully, "She also made sure I could communicate with all the children who came through. Some of them needed signs instead of spoken words. Some had been through trauma that stole their voices. Some were born different, like Thorn." Something flickered across Damien's face, too quick for her to identify. Pain? Hope? Regret? He stood abruptly, the motion fluid and predatory, and Isla had to fight the urge to press herself back in her chair. He moved to the window behind his desk, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the darkening evening sky. For a long moment, he simply stood there, tension radiating from every line of his body. "My son was born mute," he said finally, his voice rough. "In our world, in families like mine, any deviation from perfection is seen as weakness, a genetic flaw, evidence of corrupted bloodlines." His hands clenched at his sides. "Miranda, my ex-wife, she couldn't accept it. She called Thorn defective, broken, an embarrassment to the Frost name. She filed for divorce when he was 3 years old, the moment the healers confirmed his condition was permanent." Isla's chest ached. She thought of the small boy hiding behind that bookshelf, tears streaming down his face because he believed himself unwanted. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "She maintains partial custody," Damien continued, turning back to face her. The anguish in his eyes was carefully controlled but unmistakable. "Not because she wants him. She made that abundantly clear in the divorce proceedings. She keeps the arrangement because of the financial settlement, the monthly payments I provide for Thorn's care, the inheritance rights tied to shared custody. It's purely transactional." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. Isla understood, now, why Thorn felt so alone. His mother saw him as a paycheck, and his father, drowning in the weight of running a vast shifter territory and multiple business empires, couldn't find the time to bridge the gap between them. Damien moved back to his desk, bracing his hands against the polished surface. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I watched you with him today. Through the doorway. I saw how he responded to you, how he smiled for the first time in months, how he lit up when you signed to him. How, for the first time since his mother left, he looked like a child instead of a ghost." His storm-gray eyes burned into hers. "I want to hire you, not as a maid, as Thorn's companion, his tutor, someone who can actually communicate with my son and help him navigate a world that wasn't built for him." Isla's breath caught in her throat. "Mr. Frost, I don't have credentials. I'm not trained as a teacher or a therapist. I don't care about credentials." His voice carried the edge of alpha command now, the authority that made her wolf-less body want to submit. "I care about results. I saw my son happy today. I saw that he understood. That's worth more than any degree or certification." "What about the other staff?" Isla asked, her mind already spinning with implications. They'll wonder why I've been promoted. They might resent it. Some of them have been here for years. Let them wonder. Damien's tone brooked no argument. This is my house. My son. My decision. Anyone who has a problem with it can bring their concerns directly to me. Isla studied him for a long moment. Beneath the hard exterior, beneath the alpha dominance and the carefully controlled power, she could see the desperation of a father who had failed his child and was grasping at any chance for redemption. She understood that kind of desperation. She had felt it herself at the group home, watching other children suffer while she was powerless to help. I have a condition, she said slowly, watching his eyebrow rise in surprise. You're negotiating with an alpha? There was a dangerous edge to his voice, but also something that might have been respect. I'm negotiating for Thorn, Isla corrected firmly. If I'm going to help him, I need you to be part of that help. 1 hour every day minimum. You spend time with him. No phones. No work emergencies. No distractions. Just you and your son. For a heartbeat, she thought she had overstepped. Damien's eyes flashed with gold light, his wolf rising close to the surface. The air in the office grew heavy with power, pressing against her skin until it felt hard to breathe. Then slowly he nodded. Agreed. Good. Isla stood, her legs unsteady, but her resolve firm. Then I accept. Your salary will triple what you're making now. You'll move into the East Wing, near Thorn's rooms. Better access, more privacy. Damien pulled a business card from his desk drawer and handed it to her. Report tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. We'll discuss Thorn's needs and establish a proper schedule. Isla took the card, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, shocking in its intensity. She jerked back instinctively. Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. He had felt it too. There's something else you need to understand, he said as she turned to leave. The shifter world has laws, ancient laws that govern our behavior and our society. One of those laws allows for humans to be transformed through bite. A single wound from a shifter during a claim can change a human into one of us. Isla froze, her hand on the door handle. I've heard of it. Miss Helena mentioned it once. She said it was rare. Dangerous. It is both of those things, Damien agreed. But you also need to know that transformed humans are looked down upon in our society. Tainted blood, they call it. Corrupted. Even though the law says they're technically shifters, society treats them as lesser. As contaminated. His voice hardened. Miranda has allies, powerful ones, who would love any excuse to remove Thorn from my custody. You being human, working closely with my son could give them ammunition. I'm telling you this now, so you know the risk you're taking. Why are you telling me this now? Isla asked, turning back to face him. Why not before I accept it? Because you deserve to know what you're walking into, Damien said quietly. And because if you're going to be in my son's life, truly in his life, you need to understand the world we live in. Politics. The prejudices. The dangers. Isla held his gaze steadily, even though every instinct screamed at her to lower her eyes before the dominant wolf. I understand. And I still accept. Something that might have been admiration flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Good. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning, Miss Monroe. The dismissal was... Isla left the office with her head spinning and her heart racing. She had just agreed to step into a world far more complicated than scrubbing floors and avoiding eye contact. She had agreed to put herself directly in the line of fire for a 7-year-old boy who had already stolen a piece of her heart. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and small victories. Isla moved into a comfortable suite in the East Wing, 2 rooms with an attached bathroom, decorated in soft blues and creams. It was more space than she'd had in her entire life, with a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds and windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. She was close enough to Thorn's rooms that she could reach him quickly if needed, but far enough to give them both privacy. The schedule she established with Thorn was careful and structured. Morning lessons focused on traditional education, reading, mathematics, history, but taught through signs and visual aids that played to his strengths. Afternoons were for play, for building confidence, for teaching him that communication came in many forms. Thorn blossomed under the attention. His smiles came more easily now. His signs grew more complex and expressive, showing a sharp intelligence that had been buried under years of neglect. He started showing Isla his favorite books, his secret hiding places throughout the mansion, the window seat in the library where he watched the moon rise at night. And true to his word, Damien appeared every evening for an hour. The alpha learned signs alongside his son, his large hands surprisingly graceful as they formed the shapes Isla taught him. She watched father and son rebuild bridges that had been burned by pain and misunderstanding, watched them learn to communicate not just with hands but with expressions, with presence, with love. Isla tried not to notice the way her pulse quickened when Damien entered a room. She tried to ignore the warmth that spread through her chest when he laughed at something Thorn signed, the sound rare and precious, transforming his usually stern face into something breathtaking. She told herself the growing attraction was nothing more than admiration for a father fighting to connect with his child. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. The other staff noticed the change in dynamics. Mrs. Chen's lips thinned whenever Isla passed her in the hallways. The other maids whispered and fell silent when she entered the rooms. A few of the shifter staff members gave her looks that ranged from resentful to openly hostile. But no one said anything. Not directly. Not where the alpha might hear. Then Miranda arrived. Isla was in the garden with Thorn, teaching him the signs for different flowers, when a sleek black sedan pulled up to the front entrance. A woman emerged, tall and elegant, her platinum blonde hair styled in perfect waves. She moved with the fluid grace of a shifter, but there was something cold about her beauty. Something calculating in the way her ice blue eyes swept across the grounds. Thorn's hands still in the middle of signing rose. His entire body went rigid. Isla followed his gaze and understood instantly. This was Miranda, the woman who had called her son defective and walked away. Miranda's gaze landed on them, her perfect features twisting into something ugly for just a moment before smoothing back into cool neutrality. She started across the lawn toward them, her designer heels sinking into the grass with each step. "Thorn," she called, her voice carrying across the distance. "Come give your mother a proper greeting." Thorn didn't move. His hands trembled slightly, and Isla saw the fear blooming in his storm-gray eyes, so like his father's, so unlike this cold woman approaching them. Isla placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. Miranda's gaze shifted to Isla, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "And who might you be?" Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Another servant who doesn't know her place?" "I'm Isla Monroe," she replied evenly, keeping her voice respectful, but not subservient. "I'm Thorn's companion and tutor." How quaint. Miranda's laugh was brittle. "Thorn doesn't need a companion. He has everything a child could want: money, privilege, a proper home. What he needs is to learn to function in society despite his limitations." Isla felt fury rise hot in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Reacting would only make things worse for Thorn. Instead, she signed to him, keeping her movements where Miranda could see. "Do you want to see your mother?" Thorn hesitated, then signed back.
"No. She's mean.
She makes me feel small." "I saw that," Miranda snapped, and Isla realized with a jolt that the woman understood at least basic signs. "Teaching him to be disrespectful now, are we?" "I'm teaching him to communicate his feelings," Isla said carefully. "That's part of healthy development for any child." Miranda's ice blue eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're teaching human lessons to a shifter child. To my son. I wonder what the Territorial Council would say about that. About a human having such influence over the heir to the Frost territory." The threat was crystal clear. Isla felt ice slide down her spine, but she kept her expression calm. She had known this job would come with complications. She just hadn't expected them to materialize quite so quickly. "Is there a problem here?" Damien's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He strode across the lawn toward them, every inch the alpha, power radiating from him in waves that made the air shimmer with barely contained dominance. Miranda's entire demeanor shifted, becoming colder, more formal. I came to visit my son, and found him being influenced by your latest project. Isla is not a project. Damien's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. She's a valued member of this household who has done more for Thorn in 3 weeks than you've done in his entire life. If you have concerns about his care, you can direct them to me, not to her. How touching, Miranda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The great Damien Frost, defender of the helpless human. Tell me, is your judgment being compromised by something other than paternal concern? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've developed an attachment. The implication hung in the air, ugly and insinuating. Damien's eyes flashed pure gold. His wolf was right at the surface now, barely controlled. What I feel or don't feel is none of your concern. You gave up the right to question my choices when you abandoned your son because he didn't fit your definition of perfect. I did not abandon. You called him defective. Damien's voice dropped to a growl that raised the hair on Isla's arms. You told a 3-year-old child that he was broken, that he embarrassed you, that you wished he'd never been born. Don't you dare pretend otherwise. Miranda's face flushed with anger, but she had enough sense not to push further. Not here. Not now. She turned on her heel and stalked back toward her car, her movements stiff with barely contained rage. But before she climbed into the sedan, she turned back and called across the lawn. This isn't over, Damien. Not by a long shot. That human has no business raising a shifter child. And I will make sure the council sees it my way. The car door slammed. The engine roared to life. And Miranda disappeared down the long driveway, leaving behind nothing but the acrid scent of her fury. Isla's hands were shaking. She looked down at Thorn, who had wrapped himself around her waist, his small body trembling. Damien knelt beside them both, his large hand gentle on his son's back. She can't hurt you, he signed to Thorn. I won't let her. I promise. But as Isla met Damien's eyes over Thorn's head, she saw the worry there. The fear. Because they both knew Miranda had just declared war. And in the shifter world, wars were won by those with power, connections, and absolutely no mercy. Miranda has drawn her line in the sand. But what lengths will she go to in order to destroy Isla and reclaim the son she never wanted? And when the Territorial Council comes calling, will Damien's protection be enough? The battle for Thorn's future has only just begun. Chapter 3. Shadows and Whispers. The war Miranda waged was subtle at first, the kind that happened in shadows and whispered conversations that stopped the moment Isla entered a room. She noticed it in the way other staff members suddenly found reasons to leave when she approached. She heard it in the abrupt silences that fell like guillotine blades when she walked past the kitchen. Mrs. Chun, who had once been coolly professional, now refused to make eye contact. The groundskeeper who used to nod politely now turned his back whenever she came near. Someone was spreading poison, and Isla knew exactly who held the vial. It started small, insidious. Supplies she needed for Thorn's lessons would go missing, colored pencils, workbooks, the special flashcards she'd ordered, only to reappear hours later in completely wrong locations. Her carefully organized schedule would be disrupted by sudden demands from other staff that directly conflicted with her time with Thorn. Once, she returned to her room to find it ransacked. Nothing stolen, but everything disturbed. Drawers pulled open, clothes scattered, books knocked from shelves. A clear message that nowhere was truly safe. Isla understood what was happening. Miranda was building a case, collecting evidence of impropriety that didn't exist, creating a narrative of a human woman overstepping boundaries she had no right to cross. It was methodical,
Strategic.
terrifyingly effective. The other staff feared Miranda's connections, her power within the broader shifter community. One word from her could destroy careers, ruin reputations, get someone blacklisted from ever working in a shifter household again. They chose self-preservation over solidarity. Isla couldn't blame them. Survival was a powerful motivator. For weeks after Miranda's garden confrontation, the tension reached a breaking point. Isla entered the staff dining room for lunch and found every table occupied despite several empty chairs. No one met her eyes. The conversations continued as if she didn't exist, but she could smell the discomfort, hear the slight changes in pitch that meant people were deliberately excluding her. The message was clear. You don't belong here. She took her tray back to her room and ate alone, swallowing both food and humiliation in equal measure. That evening, Damien summoned the entire household staff to the main hall. Isla stood at the back, trying to make herself invisible, but his storm-gray eyes found her immediately. There was something fierce in his gaze, protective and possessive in a way that made her pulse jump. He stood at the center of the hall, positioned so that everyone had to look up at him. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air feel thick and heavy, pressing against every person in the room with the weight of absolute authority. I've become aware, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space, that some of you have been making Thorn's companion feel unwelcome. This ends now. The room fell into absolute silence. Isla could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the fear rising from the other staff members as they realized their alpha was displeased. Isla Monroe is under my direct protection, Damien continued, and his eyes flashed with gold light. She has done more for my son in a few weeks than most of you have managed in years. Anyone who interferes with her work, who spreads rumors or creates obstacles, will answer to me personally. Am I understood? The alpha command in his voice was unmistakable now, pressing against every shifter in the room with irresistible force. They couldn't help but respond, their wolves recognizing and submitting to the dominance. Yes, Alpha, came the chorus of replies, some more reluctant than others. Good. Damien's gaze swept the room once more before landing on Mrs. Chen. If anyone has concerns about anything happening in this household, you bring them to me, not to anyone else, especially not to my ex-wife. Is that clear? The head housekeeper paled but nodded quickly. Yes, Alpha. Crystal clear. Damien dismissed them all with a gesture, and the staff fled like scattered birds before a storm. Only Isla remained, frozen in place by the intensity of what had just happened. Damien crossed the room to her, and she could see the barely controlled fury still simmering in his eyes. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentler now but still rough around the edges. I knew there would be resistance, Isla said quietly. I didn't expect it to be quite so organized. Miranda. The name was a growl. She has a talent for turning people against each other, for finding weak points and exploiting them. I should have anticipated this. You can't protect me from everything, Isla said softly. And, honestly, your protection just painted an even bigger target on my back. Now they'll resent me for having the Alpha's favor on top of everything else. Let them resent you. Damien's hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell back to his side, a gesture of restraint that spoke volumes. As long as they respect the boundaries I've set, their personal feelings are irrelevant. But you're important to Thorn, Damien interrupted, his storm-gray eyes intense. That makes you important to me. I won't tolerate anyone who tries to undermine that. Isla's breath caught at the weight in his gaze. There was something there beyond simple gratitude or professional respect. Something that made her skin warm and her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with fear. She saw the moment he realized it too, the way his pupils dilated, the way his nostrils flared slightly as if catching a scent he couldn't quite identify but recognized as significant. The moment shattered when Thorn's scream pierced the air from upstairs. They both ran. Isla's shorter legs struggled to keep pace with Damien's long strides, but adrenaline pushed her forward. They burst into Thorn's bedroom to find the boy thrashing in his bed, caught in the grip of a nightmare. His small hands clutched the sheets, and tears streamed down his face, even though his eyes remained closed. Isla reached him first, sitting on the edge of the bed and placing gentle hands on his shoulders. Thorn, she said softly, keeping her voice calm and steady. Wake up, sweetheart. It's just a dream. You're safe. His eyes flew open, wild and frightened, storm-gray filled with terror. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her. Then focus returned, and he threw himself into her arms with such force, she nearly fell backward. She held him close, one hand stroking his dark hair, murmuring wordless sounds of comfort even though she knew he couldn't hear the tone the way others could. But he could feel her heartbeat, feel the safety of her embrace, and gradually his small body stopped shaking. Damien stood in the doorway, his expression torn between helplessness and something that looked like agony. Isla met his eyes over Thorne's head and gestured for him to come closer. He hesitated, as if he'd forgotten how to approach his own son, then moved to sit on the other side of the bed. Thorne's sobs gradually quieted. Isla pulled back enough to sign, her movements visible to both father and son. "What did you dream about?" Thorne's hands trembled as he signed back.
Mom.
"She was yelling that I'm broken, that I ruin everything, that Dad wishes I was never born." Isla's heart shattered. She looked at Damien and saw the same devastation written across his face, the realization that his son carried these fears, that Miranda's poison had sunk deeper than either of them had known. Damien's hand reached out, hovering uncertainly near Thorne's shoulder, as if he had forgotten how to touch his own child. "That's not true," Isla signed firmly, making sure both of them could see. "Your father loves you very much. So much that it scares him sometimes." Thorne looked at Damien with hope and doubt warring in his gray eyes. Damien swallowed hard, then moved his hands, carefully forming the signs Isla had taught him over the past weeks. "She's right," he signed, the movements still slightly awkward but sincere. "I'm sorry I made you feel alone. I was afraid I'd hurt you more by not knowing how to help you. But Isla taught me. She's teaching me how to be the father you deserve." Fresh tears spilled down Thorne's face, but these were different, cleaner somehow. He launched himself at Damien, wrapping small arms around his father's neck. Damien caught him, holding on with desperate strength, and Isla saw his own eyes glisten with unshed tears. "Can you stay?" Thorne signed when he finally pulled back, looking between them both. "Both of you? I don't want to sleep alone." Isla glanced at Damien, unsure. Spending the night in the Alpha's son's room felt like crossing a line, inviting more gossip, more judgment. But Damien nodded without hesitation. "We'll stay." They settled into Thorne's room, Isla in the plush reading chair by the window, Damien in another chair he pulled close to the bed. Thorne curled under his blankets, his hand reaching out to hold his father's, not wanting to break the physical connection. Isla began to sign stories, her hands weaving tales in the air. Stories of brave children who faced down monsters, of misunderstood creatures who found their place in the world, of families that came together despite impossible odds. Thorne's eyes grew heavy, his grip on Damien's hand loosening as sleep reclaimed him, peaceful this time, without nightmares. But still they stayed, watching over him as the night deepened outside the windows and the moon climbed higher in the sky. Isla felt the weight of Damien's gaze on her and looked up to find him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you," he mouthed silently, not signing but knowing she could read his lips. Isla smiled and shook her head, signing with small movements so as not to wake Thorne. "You're doing the hard part. I'm just translating." "You're doing far more than that," Damien signed back, his movements more confident now. "You gave me my son back. I don't know how to repay that."
Keep showing up, Isla signed.
"Keep learning.
Keep trying.
That's all the payment I need." They sat in comfortable silence after that, two guardians watching over a sleeping child. Eventually, when Thorne's breathing had settled into the deep rhythms of true rest, they slipped quietly from the room. In the hallway outside, the space felt suddenly smaller, more intimate. Isla was intensely aware of Damien's proximity, of the heat radiating from his body, of the way his scent enveloped her. Pine and winter storms and something wild that made her want to lean closer instead of stepping away. "Isla," he said softly, and just her name on his lips made her shiver. "What you said in there about me being scared, you're right. After the divorce, after watching Miranda reject him so completely, I was terrified of getting close to Thorne again. Terrified that I would fail him the way she did. That he would look at me with fear instead of love." He doesn't look at you that way, Isla said quietly. He looks at you with hope, with trust. He just needed to know you felt the same. I do. Damien's voice was rough with emotion. God, I do. He's everything to me. They stood there in the dim hallway, the rest of the house silent around them. Isla's hand rested on the doorframe, and Damien's was beside it, their fingers nearly touching. She could feel the electricity between them, the magnetic pull that had been growing stronger with every shared glance, every moment spent working together for Thorne's happiness. Damien's hand shifted, his pinky finger brushing against hers. The contact sent sparks racing up Isla's arm, and she saw his eyes darken in response, gold bleeding through the gray. His hand moved again, covering hers completely. The warmth of his skin against hers made her breath hitch. Isla, he said again, her name almost a question this time. She didn't pull away.
Couldn't pull away.
Every instinct she possessed was screaming at her that this was dangerous, that nothing good could come from a human woman wanting an alpha the way she was beginning to want this one. But her body didn't care about logic or consequences. It only cared about the way his thumb traced slow circles on her wrist, about the way his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility and promise. Then footsteps echoed from the floor below, one of the night staff making rounds, and they broke apart like guilty teenagers. Damien cleared his throat, straightening to his full height and putting professional distance between them. I should check the security reports, he said, his voice formal again, though his eyes still held that heated look. And you should get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. Isla nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him walk away, his shoulders tight with tension, and pressed her hand against her chest where her heart hammered wildly. She was in dangerous territory now, and she knew it. But as she returned to her room and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, all she could think about was the way Damien's hand had felt against hers, warm and strong and protective, and the way he had looked at her as if she were precious, as if she mattered beyond what she could do for his son, as if she were someone worth wanting. The next morning brought a new complication. Rowan, Damien's beta and second-in-command, appeared during breakfast, his expression grim. He was a lean man with sharp features and amber eyes that missed nothing. His dark hair was pulled back in a short tail, and he moved with the efficient grace of a warrior. He pulled Damien aside near the windows, but their voices carried clearly to where Isla sat with Thorne at the dining table. Miranda's been talking to council members, Rowan said quietly, his tone professional but concerned. Asking questions about the appropriateness of a human caring for a shifter child, especially the heir to a major territory. She's building something, Damien. A case of some kind. We need to be ready. Isla's appetite vanished. She set down her fork and signed to Thorne that she needed a moment, then rose and approached the two men. They both looked at her, Damien with concern, Rowan with professional assessment that wasn't hostile, but wasn't exactly welcoming either. How bad is it? She asked directly, keeping her voice low. Rowan glanced at Damien, who nodded permission. She's being careful, the beta said, his amber eyes studying her. Not making direct accusations yet. Just planting seeds of doubt. Questioning whether it's appropriate for Thorne to be so influenced by human customs when he needs to learn shifter ways. Whether having someone without understanding of pack dynamics is harmful to his development as a future alpha. In other words, Isla said flatly, she's painting me as a threat to his shifter identity. Essentially, yes. Rowan's expression was sympathetic but realistic. The Territorial Council won't act without concrete evidence of harm, but Miranda is patient. She'll wait for the right moment to strike. And when she does, she'll have built enough support that fighting back will be difficult. Damien's hand clenched at his side, the only outward sign of his fury. Then we don't give her that moment. We make sure everything Isla does is above reproach. We document Thorne's progress, his improved emotional state, his growing confidence, his development. We build our own case. Agreed, Rowan said. But you should know, there are already whispers about Isla's position here. About the amount of time you spend with her and Thorne together. Some are suggesting your judgment might be compromised by personal feelings. The silence that followed was deafening. Isla felt heat rise in her cheeks as both men carefully avoided looking at her. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. "My personal feelings are irrelevant. My son's well-being is what matters. If anyone has concerns about that, they can bring them to me directly." Rowan nodded, but his eyes held doubt, the kind that said he'd been around long enough to recognize when his alpha was lying to himself. He excused himself, leaving Isla and Damien alone in the suddenly too small dining room. Thorn remained at the table, his attention focused on his breakfast, but Isla knew he could hear every word with his enhanced shifter hearing. Knew he understood more than either of them wanted him to. "I'm sorry," Damien said after a long moment. "This isn't what you signed up for." "I signed up to help Thorn," Isla replied, lifting her chin. "Everything else is just noise." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Everything else was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Miranda's web is tightening, and the whispers are growing louder. When the Territorial Council finally makes their move, will Damien's protection be enough? Or will Isla have to make an impossible choice between staying human and staying with the family she's come to love? The storm is coming, and no one will escape unscathed. Chapter 4: Moonlit Confessions. The weeks that followed brought changes that felt both gradual and seismic. Damien's daily hour with Thorn evolved into 2 hours, then 3. Isla watched father and son rebuild what had been broken, one signed conversation at a time. The awkwardness faded as Damien's hands grew more confident, his signs more natural. He learned not just the language, but the rhythm of it. The way Thorn's eyes lit up when his father asked questions instead of simply giving orders. Isla tried to remain objective, to see herself as merely a bridge between them. But objectivity became impossible when she caught Damien watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Or when his hand would brush hers as they worked together on Thorn's lessons, sending electricity racing through her veins. Or when he would smile at something she signed, his entire face transforming in ways that made her forget how to breathe. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one evening as she watched him laugh at something Thorn had signed, his storm-gray eyes crinkling at the corners, his usually stern face softening with genuine joy. It wasn't just attraction, though that burned hot enough. It was the way he tried so hard. The way he listened with his whole body when Thorn spoke. The way he looked at his son with a love so fierce it made Clara's chest ache. Damien felt it too. She saw it in the way his gaze lingered on her face, in the careful distance he maintained as if afraid of what might happen if he got too close. The air between them grew charged, heavy with unspoken words and suppressed desire. Every interaction became a dance of near touches and loaded glances, of conversations that meant more than the words being said. Thorn's 8th birthday arrived on a crisp November morning. Isla had spent the previous week secretly planning with the kitchen staff, decorating his room while he slept with streamers in his favorite colors, silver and deep blue. When Thorn woke to find his room transformed, balloons floating near the ceiling and a carefully wrapped pile of gifts at the foot of his bed, his smile could have lit the entire mansion. He threw his arms around Isla, then his father, bouncing with excitement that made him look truly childlike for the first time since she'd met him. The celebration was small and intimate, just the three of them. They spent the day together, playing games that Thorn chose, eating his favorite foods prepared by a kitchen staff who had grudgingly started to warm to Isla's presence. They read stories in the library as afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, and Isla captured every moment in her memory, knowing she would treasure it always. This was what family felt like. This sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. As evening approached, Damien pulled Isla aside while Thorn was distracted with a complex puzzle featuring wolves under a full moon. They stood in the hallway outside the library, close enough that she could smell his scent, pine and winter storms, and something wild that made her want to move closer instead of maintaining proper distance. "There's something else planned for tonight," Damien said quietly, his voice carrying an undercurrent of emotion she couldn't quite identify. "Thorn's first transformation. He's ready, and the full moon will give him strength." Isla's eyes widened. That's incredible. He must be so excited. He is. Damien's expression grew serious, almost vulnerable. But Isla, there's something you need to know. First, transformations are sacred in our culture. The family witnesses them, celebrates them. It's one of the most important moments in a young shifter's life. I understand, Isla said, already planning to make herself scarce. I'll give you privacy. This should be between you and Thorn. No. Damien's hand caught her wrist gently but firmly. I want you there.
Thorn wants you there.
You're part of this family now, whether society recognizes it or not. The words sent warmth flooding through Isla's chest, but she forced herself to think practically. Are you sure? If it's sacred, if there are traditions, I don't want to disrespect your culture. You've earned the right to be there, Damien interrupted, his storm gray eyes intense. More than most people connected to us by blood. But I need you to understand the risk. Miranda will likely hear about this. She's been waiting for ammunition, and a human witnessing a sacred ritual is exactly the kind of transgression she can use against us. Isla met his gaze steadily, her jaw set with determination. Then let her try. I'm not abandoning Thorn on one of the most important nights of his life, because his mother might throw a tantrum. Something fierce and proud blazed in Damien's eyes. His hand was still on her wrist, his thumb tracing the delicate bones there. The touch was innocent, but felt anything but. Heat pooled in Isla's stomach as a scent wrapped around her, making her want to lean into him, to close the distance between them, to see if his lips tasted as good as they looked. You're remarkable, he murmured, and the roughness in his voice made her shiver. Do you know that? Before Isla could respond, Thorn appeared in the doorway, singing excitedly about the moon rising soon, about how he could feel something different inside him, something wild and powerful that wanted to run free. The moment broke, but the heat in Damien's eyes promised it wasn't forgotten. They gathered in a private clearing on the estate's grounds as twilight deepened into night. The full moon hung heavy and luminous above the trees, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine needles and earth and something electric that made Isla's skin prickle with awareness. Thorn stood in the center of the clearing, nervous energy radiating from his small frame. He wore simple clothes that would tear away easily during the shift, loose cotton that wouldn't restrict his changing body. Isla positioned herself at the edge of the clearing, giving him space, but staying close enough that he could see her encouraging smile. Damien knelt beside his son, hands moving in gentle signs that caught the moonlight. Remember what we practiced. Let your wolf rise naturally.
Don't force it.
Don't fight it. Just feel the moon and let yourself change. Thorn nodded, his gray eyes wide but determined. He closed them, tilting his face up toward the moon, and for long moments, nothing happened. Then his body began to shimmer, bones shifting beneath skin in ways that should have been impossible but looked strangely beautiful in the moonlight. Isla watched in awe as the boy transformed, his human shape melting away to reveal a wolf pup with dark gray fur and bright eyes the color of storm clouds. The wolf was smaller than average, delicate-looking, with oversized paws he would eventually grow into, but absolutely perfect. He yipped and spun in circles, clearly delighted with himself. His tail wagged furiously as he bounded around the clearing, testing his new body with puppy enthusiasm. Damien shifted as well, his transformation swift and powerful. He became a massive wolf with fur the color of midnight, his eyes glowing gold with pride. He was easily 3 times the size of his son, all raw power and predatory grace. He nuzzled Thorn gently, pride evident in every movement, and Isla couldn't stop the tears that spilled down her cheeks. This was magic, pure and beautiful and sacred, and she felt privileged beyond measure to witness it. Thorn bounded over to her in wolf form, his tail wagging so hard his entire back and moved with it. She knelt and ran her hands through his soft fur, laughing as he licked her face with puppy enthusiasm. "You're beautiful," she whispered, knowing he could hear her even if he couldn't respond. "So strong and brave and perfect." The moment was perfect, which meant, of course, that it couldn't last. Within 4 days, Miranda had called an emergency session of the Territorial Council. Rowan delivered the news with grim efficiency, his expression tight with controlled anger as he briefed Damien in the study. Isla stood nearby, guilt churning in her stomach like acid. This was her fault. She should have refused to attend the transformation. Should have known Miranda would find out somehow. Should have protected Damien and Thorn by staying away. She's claiming that Isla's presence at Thorn's first shift was a violation of sacred tradition, Rowan explained, his amber eyes flickering between them. That allowing a human to witness such an intimate ritual shows fundamental disrespect for shifter culture and calls into question your judgment as a father and as alpha. My judgment as a father has never been better, Damien growled, his eyes flashing gold. Thorn is thriving. Any member of the council with eyes can see that. They can, Rowan agreed carefully. But Miranda isn't arguing about results. She's arguing about propriety. About whether a human should have this much influence over a shifter child, especially one from a prominent family like yours. Especially one who will eventually need to take his place as alpha of this territory. Isla found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. Maybe I should step back. Take a less visible role. If my presence is causing problems.
No.
Damien's word was absolute, carrying the weight of alpha command. You're not stepping back from anything. I'll handle the council. Damien, Rowan started. I said I'll handle it. The alpha's tone brooked no argument. The council meeting took place 2 days later in the formal chambers downtown, a granite building that reeked of old power and older prejudices. Isla wasn't allowed to attend, wasn't permitted to defend herself or explain her perspective. She could only wait at the mansion with Thorn, both of them tense and worried, while Damien faced Miranda's accusations alone. Rowan stayed with them, his presence both comforting and unsettling. He paced the library like a caged predator, checking his phone every few minutes for updates that didn't come. Thorn sat curled against Isla's side on the leather sofa, his small hand gripping hers tightly. His gray eyes were wide with fear, the kind that came from understanding more than a child should have to. Will they take me away? He signed, his movements jerky with anxiety. No. Isla signed back firmly, even though she had no way of guaranteeing that. Your father won't let that happen. Neither will I. But what if they make you leave? What if I never see you again? Isla pulled him closer, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. Then I'll find a way back to you. I promise. Nothing will keep me away from you. Not the council, not your mother, not anything. It was a promise she had no idea if she could keep. But watching the fear in Thorn's eyes, feeling his small body trembling against hers, she knew she would fight with everything she had to make it true. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Rowan's pacing grew more agitated. Thorn fell into an exhausted sleep against Isla's shoulder, worn out by anxiety. And still no word came from the council chambers. Finally, just after sunset, Isla heard the front door open. Heard the heavy footfalls of multiple people entering the mansion. Damien appeared in the library doorway with Rowan close behind him. His expression was dark but triumphant, and Isla could read the outcome in both their faces before either man spoke. She lost, Damien said simply, and the relief in his voice was palpable. The council ruled that as alpha of this territory, I have the right to determine who witnesses family rituals. They can't remove Thorn from my custody based on my choice of companions or who I include in private family moments. Relief made Isla's knees weak. She carefully shifted Thorn's sleeping form so she could stand, her legs unsteady beneath her. But Damien's expression warned her there was more. However, he continued, his voice dropping lower, the council issued an ultimatum. I can keep you in the household. I can let you continue working with Thorn. But if I pursue a romantic relationship with you, if I formally court you as shifter tradition dictates, it will be seen as a betrayal of our culture. An alpha choosing a human over eligible shifter females sends a message that could damage my standing in the community and, by extension, threaten the stability of this territory. The words hit like physical blows. Isla forced herself to nod, to accept what she'd always known deep down. Whatever attraction existed between them, whatever feelings were growing, they could never be acted upon. The price was too high. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's fine. I'm here for Thorn anyway. Nothing else matters." "It matters to me," Damien said roughly, his storm-gray eyes burning into hers. "It matters a great deal." He turned and walked away, leaving Isla standing in the library with her heart breaking and Rowan watching with sympathetic eyes. She excused herself quickly, needing to be alone, needing to process the sharp ache of a future that would never exist. She found herself in the garden as night fell, sitting on a stone bench beneath the bare branches of an oak tree. The moon was waning now, no longer the brilliant orb that had witnessed Thorn's transformation, but still beautiful in its imperfection. Isla wrapped her arms around herself against the November chill and tried not to cry. Footsteps approached from behind, silent on the grass. She didn't need to turn to know it was Damien. His son announced him, pine and winter storms and wild things that called to something deep inside her. "Isla," he said, and her name was a prayer, a plea, a promise all at once. She stood and turned to face him. He was silhouetted against the mansion lights, tall and powerful and looking at her as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. "I've spent the last few hours thinking about what the council said," Damien began, moving closer. "About choosing between my standing in the community and what I want. And I've made a decision." Isla's heart hammered. "Damien, don't sacrifice your position for you." He closed the distance between them, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that belied his strength. "Isla, you gave me back my son. You made me remember what it means to be human underneath the alpha. To feel something besides responsibility and duty. You walk into every room and make it brighter just by existing. How could I not choose you?" His thumb stroked her cheekbone, and she felt herself trembling. "The council can challenge me if they dare. I've ruled this territory for 10 years with absolute authority. I'm not about to let them dictate who I can love." "I'm human," she whispered, even as hope bloomed painful and fierce in her chest. "I can't give you what a shifter mate could. I can't. You've already given me everything that matters." His forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "Say yes. Say you feel this too, this pull between us that gets stronger every day." Isla's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on as if he might disappear. "I feel it," she admitted, her voice breaking. "God, Damien, I feel it so much it terrifies me." His smile was beautiful, transforming his usually serious face into something that stole her breath. "Good. Fear means it matters." Then he kissed her, and Isla's world tilted on its axis. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't want to be gentle. She'd spent weeks denying this, suppressing the want that built with every glance, every accidental touch. Now, with permission finally granted, she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing she'd been hiding. Damien groaned against her mouth, one hand tangling in her hair, while the other pulled her closer. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, speaking of desire and need and promises that would reshape both their lives. Isla clung to him, drowning in sensation, in the taste and scent and feel of him. His body was warm and solid against hers, his strength carefully controlled, his touch reverent despite the passion burning between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the moon hung above them like a witness to something sacred. Damien rested his forehead against hers again, his eyes molten gold. "Tomorrow," he said roughly, "I'm announcing to the council and everyone who matters that I'm courting you. That you're mine." "Yours," Isla echoed, testing the word and finding it perfect. "And you're mine. Always," he promised, and kissed her again beneath the stars. Miranda's downfall came quietly at first. Whispers of her manipulation spread through the shifter community after the council hearing. Her carefully constructed alliances began to crumble as others realized she'd been using them, playing on their prejudices to serve her own financial interests rather than any genuine concern for shifter traditions. Pacts that had once courted her influence began to turn away. Invitations to important social events dried up. Her new fiancé, Marcus, started making excuses to avoid being seen with her in public. For the first time in her carefully curated life, Miranda found herself isolated, alone, facing the consequences of her cruelty. And in the Frost mansion, under the waning November moon, a new family was being forged, one built not on blood or tradition, but on choice and love and the fierce determination to protect those who mattered most. Damien has made his choice, and Isla has made hers. But Miranda won't go down without a fight. When she strikes back with everything she has left, will their newfound happiness survive? Or will the shifting world's prejudices tear apart what they've built? The real battle is just beginning. Chapter 5. The Price of Love. The romance that bloomed between Isla and Damien existed in stolen moments that felt both precious and fragile. Morning coffee in the kitchen before Thorn woke, their fingers brushing as they passed cups, the contact sending sparks racing up Isla's arm. Evening walks through the frost-covered gardens after the boys slept, their breath misting in the cold air as they talked about everything and nothing. Conversations that lasted hours under stars that witnessed their growing bond, their voices low and intimate in the darkness. Kisses hidden behind closed doors, desperate and hungry, speaking of a need neither could fully satisfy while the world watched and judged. Isla had never felt anything like this. The pull toward Damien was magnetic, overwhelming, consuming. When he touched her, the world narrowed to just the two of them. When he looked at her with those storm-gray eyes that could shift to molten gold, she forgot every reason why this was dangerous. She was falling, had already fallen, was drowning in feelings that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Damien's wolf recognized her now in ways that went beyond simple acknowledgement. She could see it in the way his eyes flashed gold when she entered a room, in the possessive way his hand found the small of her back whenever they stood together, in how his scent wrapped around her until she carried traces of pine and winter storms on her own skin. He was claiming her in small ways, leaving his mark even though they couldn't make it official. Not yet. Not while Miranda still circled like a wounded predator looking for one final strike. Thorn flourished in the warmth of their growing family. His signs became more complex, his confidence growing daily. He laughed more, played more, trusted more. When Isla tucked him in at night, he would sign that he loved her, and she would sign it back with a full heart that threatened to burst with how much she cared for this brave, brilliant boy. The three of them were becoming something real, something precious, which made what came next hurt all the more. Rowan appeared one morning in early December with news that made Damien's entire body go rigid with barely controlled fury. Isla watched from where she sat with Thorn at the breakfast table, teaching him advanced vocabulary signs, as the beta pulled the alpha aside near the tall windows overlooking the snow-dusted grounds. "We have a problem," Rowan said quietly, though Isla's human ears still caught the words. "Miranda has a new strategy. She's engaged to Marcus Thornridge from the Ironwood Pack. They're planning to marry within 3 months." "Good for her," Damien replied coldly, his voice flat. "Maybe she'll finally leave us alone. That's not the issue." Rowan's jaw tightened, his amber eyes dark with concern. If she remarries without maintaining custody of Thorn, she loses the monthly support payments and his inheritance rights. All of it reverts solely to you, and eventually to Thorn. She stands to lose close to $20 million over the next decade. Understanding dawned in Damien's eyes, followed immediately by rage. So, she's going to fight harder to keep custody. Use whatever ammunition she has left. Exactly. Rowan pulled out a thick folder of legal documents, his expression grim. "And Damien, there's something else. I've been researching ancient shifter laws, looking for anything that might help us if she escalates further. I found something." He opened the folder, pointing to a section of densely written text. "An old provision that allows humans to be legally recognized as shifters if they're transformed through a mating bite. It's technically valid, though it's rarely used anymore because transformed humans face severe discrimination in our society." Isla's blood went cold. She had meant to eavesdrop, but now she couldn't unhear what Rowan had revealed.
No.
Damien's voice was hard as stone, absolute in its finality. Absolutely not. I won't even consider that option. I'm not saying we use it, Rowan said carefully, his tone diplomatic. I'm saying it exists as a last resort. If Miranda manages to build a case strong enough to threaten your custody, and with her desperation over the money, she will try, this could be the legal solution that removes her ammunition entirely. Isla would technically be a shifter, eliminating the argument about human influence over Thorn. And she would spend the rest of her life being called tainted blood, corrupted, lesser. Damien's hands clenched into fists, the knuckles white with tension. I won't do that to her. I won't turn her into something society will reject just to win a legal battle. Isla's heart swelled and broke simultaneously. He was protecting her even from a solution that could solve everything, even from her own potential choice in the matter. She wanted to go to him, to tell him she would consider it if it meant keeping Thorn safe. But the conversation ended before she could move, Rowan nodding and leaving while Damien stood alone by the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. The weeks that followed were marked by a growing sense of unease that settled over the mansion like morning fog, thick and choking, and impossible to ignore. Miranda's network of informants within the household, whoever they were, had clearly reported everything to her. The romance. The declarations. The nights Damien spent in Isla's suite, emerging just before dawn with rumpled clothes and satisfaction written across his features. Isla could feel eyes watching her constantly now, could sense the walls closing in with every passing day. But she refused to hide, refused to let fear dictate her actions or diminish what she and Damien had built together. If Miranda wanted a war, Isla would stand her ground. The charity gala arrived with all the pomp and circumstance expected of high shifter society. It was a winter fundraiser benefiting children's hospitals, hosted at the city's most prestigious hotel, a glittering palace of marble and crystal that reeked of old money and older prejudices. Damien had been obligated to attend as one of the event's major donors and sponsors. Isla knew this would be Miranda's chance to strike publicly, to humiliate them both in front of the people whose opinions shaped a shifter society. She dressed carefully that evening, choosing a deep sapphire gown that brought out her eyes. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would draw unnecessary attention, but elegant enough to belong in these circles. Her dark hair was swept up in a simple twist, a few tendrils framing her face. Damien appeared in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made him look every inch the powerful alpha he was, dangerous and refined in equal measure. The heat in his gaze when he saw her made Isla's knees weak. "You're stunning," he murmured, his hand finding hers for just a moment before propriety demanded distance. His thumb traced her knuckles in a gesture so intimate it made her shiver. "You look rather impressive yourself," she replied, allowing herself a small smile that made his eyes flash gold. Thorn stayed home with trusted staff, too young for such formal events and honestly safer away from whatever drama was about to unfold. Isla missed his presence already, the buffer he provided between her and the judgmental stares she knew would come. The ballroom was magnificent in its excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from vaulted ceilings, casting rainbow prisms across marble floors so polished they looked like dark mirrors. The space was filled with the cream of shifter society, alphas and their mates, wealthy pack members, business associates who dealt in both human and supernatural markets. Isla could smell the power in the air the moment they entered, could see it in the way people moved and interacted, in the subtle hierarchies played out through posture and positioning. Dominance and submission were on full display here, packaged in designer gowns and expensive tuxedos. She stayed close to Damien, acutely aware of the whispers that followed them like a wake. The human, the companion, the alpha's latest fascination. Does she really think she belongs here? She heard it all and forced herself to hold her head high, to meet curious gazes with calm confidence. She belonged here because Damien wanted her here. That was enough. Miranda arrived fashionably late, because of course she did, draped in diamonds that probably cost more than Isla would earn in a lifetime. Her gown was white silk that clung to her perfect figure, her platinum hair styled in elaborate waves that must have taken hours. Her new fiancé, Marcus, was at her side, handsome in a cold, sharp-edged way, his eyes calculating as they swept the room. Miranda's gaze found Isla immediately, and her smile was pure venom. The first hour passed without a major incident. Isla spoke politely to those who approached, deflected invasive questions with practiced grace, and tried to ignore the weight of hostile stares. Damien remained at her side when he could, his presence a steady anchor, but his position demanded he circulate, schmoozing with other alphas, discussing business with associates, maintaining the political connections that kept his territory stable. Isla was standing near the bar, sipping champagne she didn't want, when Miranda struck. "Isla Monroe," Miranda said, her voice carrying across nearby conversations like a bell. "How brave of you to attend tonight. I'm surprised Damien allowed his son's babysitter to come to such an important event. Surely you have floors to scrub somewhere?" Several heads turned. Conversations died. The crowd sensed blood in the water. Isla set down her glass carefully, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "I'm here as Damien's guest," she replied evenly, keeping her voice calm and professional. "And I prefer the title of companion and tutor to babysitter." "Of course you do." Miranda's laugh was crystalline and cruel, designed to cut. She circled Isla slowly, a predator stalking prey, making sure everyone could see the power dynamic. "Tell me, does it bother you? Knowing that no matter how much time you spend with Thorn, you'll never truly be part of his world? You're human, dear. You can play house all you want, dress up in pretty gowns and pretend to belong, but at the end of the day, you're just the help. A temporary amusement for an alpha going through a midlife crisis." Isla felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. "Thorn's well-being is what matters to me. Not titles or status or what people like you think about where I came from." "How noble." Miranda's eyes glittered with malice, enjoying the growing audience. "But we both know you're after more than just Thorn's well-being, aren't you? You've set your sights on an alpha, hoping he'll overlook your inferior genetics, your complete lack of pack ties, your absolute worthlessness in terms of what you can offer his bloodline. Tell me, what exactly are your qualifications beyond spreading your legs?" The crowd gasped. Several people looked uncomfortable, but no one intervened. "Miranda, that's enough." Damien's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He appeared at Isla's side, his presence radiating barely controlled fury. His eyes had gone full gold, his wolf right at the surface. "You will not speak to her that way." "Is it though?" Miranda's voice rose, theatrical and perfectly pitched to reach every ear in the room. "Everyone here is wondering the same thing, Damien. What could possibly make you choose a human over suitable shifter mates? Is it rebellion against tradition? Temporary insanity? Or has your judgment become so compromised that you can't see what a liability she is? How is she poisoning your son against his own heritage?" "My personal life is none of your concern," Damien growled low, his hands clenched at his sides. The air around him shimmered with barely contained power. "And Isla has done more for Thorn in 6 months than you did in 7 years. It becomes my concern when it affects my son." Miranda's voice dripped with false maternal concern. "You're so busy playing happy family with your little human pet that you're forgetting what Thorn needs. He needs to learn shifter customs, shifter values, how to be a proper alpha. He needs a real Luna, someone with actual pack blood, not some charity case maid who taught him to use his hands because she can't understand what it means to have a wolf." Isla's nails bit into her palms. Every word was carefully chosen, designed to wound and humiliate and undermine everything they'd built. She wanted to walk away, to refuse Miranda the satisfaction of a reaction. But then the final blow came. "Honestly," Miranda declared, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom, "I'm starting to think Thorn would be better off with me after all. At least then, he wouldn't be raised to believe his defect is acceptable. At least then, he wouldn't become even more of a burden than he already is. Dead weight that only serves to drain resources and bring shame to the Frost name. Perhaps the kindest thing would be to Isla's hand moved before her brain caught up. The slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Miranda's head snapped to the side, her perfect makeup disrupted, a red handprint blooming across her pale cheek. Her expression transformed from shock to triumph in the span of a heartbeat. The crowd collectively gasped. Isla's hand stung, her chest heaving, and she realized with cold horror what she had just done. How she had played directly into Miranda's trap. Did everyone see that? Miranda's voice was shrill with manufactured distress, one hand pressed to her reddening cheek. She attacked me. This is the woman Damien trusts with his son. Someone violent and unstable who can't control her temper. Someone who would strike a woman in public over a few harsh truths. You called your own son worthless, Isla said, her voice shaking with fury. You suggested he'd be better off, what? Dead? Given away? You're a monster. I spoke difficult truths that needed to be said, Miranda countered, playing to the crowd. And you responded with violence. Marcus, darling, please call my lawyer.
I want this documented.
Every witness here saw her assault me unprovoked. Witnesses. Miranda addressed the crowd directly. All of you saw this. A human woman, unstable and inappropriate, having undue influence over a young shifter. This is exactly why the council should reconsider custody arrangements. The crowd murmured, some sympathetic to Isla, others clearly siding with Miranda, all of them hungry for the drama unfolding before them. Damien moved to place himself between Isla and his ex-wife, his body vibrating with barely suppressed rage. You planned this, he said quietly, dangerously. You baited her deliberately. Use your own son as ammunition to provoke a reaction. I expressed legitimate concerns about my son's upbringing, Miranda said smoothly, her smile razor-sharp beneath the red handprint. And your companion assaulted me for it. The Territorial Council will hear about this. They'll hear about all of it, the violence, the inappropriate relationship, the human woman having undue influence over the heir to your territory. It's grounds for a full custody review, Damien. You know it is. Rowan appeared from the crowd, his expression grim as stone. We should leave.
Now.
Damien nodded once, his hand finding Isla's elbow with gentle firmness. They made their way through the gawking crowd, Isla's face burning with shame and anger and the terrible knowledge that she had given Miranda exactly what she wanted. In the car ride home, the silence was suffocating. Isla stared out the window at the passing city lights, watching them blur through the tears she refused to let fall. Her hand still stung from the slap, but that pain was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. I'm sorry, she whispered finally, her voice breaking. I lost control. I gave her exactly what she wanted. I've ruined everything. She was vile, Damien replied, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. What she said about Thorn was unforgivable, monstrous. But I should have been stronger. Should have walked away. Should have. You were defending our son. His hand found hers in the darkness, gripping tight. You were defending the boy we both love. I'm not angry at you, Isla. I'm furious at her for manipulating the situation, for using Thorn as a weapon. And I'm terrified of what comes next. Rowan's voice came from the driver's seat, measured and professional despite the circumstances. Miranda filed a petition for emergency custody review within 30 minutes of the incident. She had her lawyer on speed dial. Witnesses lined up, everything ready. The Territorial Council has agreed to an expedited hearing. We have 1 week to prepare our defense. 1 week. 1 week before they decided if Damien kept full custody of Thorn, or if Miranda got what she wanted. The money, the control, the ability to continue tormenting a child she'd never loved. Isla closed her eyes against the tears threatening to fall. 1 week to save the little boy she loved, the family she had found. 1 week before everything she had built might crumble to dust. Isla's loss of control has given Miranda the ammunition she needed. With the custody hearing only days away, desperate times call for desperate measures. Will Isla have to make the ultimate sacrifice, her humanity, to save the family she loves? Or will there be another way to defeat Miranda's schemes once and for all? The final battle approaches, and the cost of victory may be higher than anyone imagined. Chapter 6. The Weight of Choice. The council chamber was built to intimidate, and it succeeded brilliantly. Vaulted ceilings stretched high overhead, disappearing into shadows that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Dark oak paneling covered the walls, ancient wood that had witnessed centuries of judgments, decisions that had shaped shifter society from its earliest days. The curved table where the 7 council members sat created a semicircle of authority that made Isla feel small and exposed, like a specimen under glass. The air smelled of old leather and power, of wood smoke and something metallic that might have been fear or blood or both. Isla sat in a wooden chair that felt more like a witness stand than a seat. Damien was beside her, radiating controlled fury that made the air around him shimmer with heat. Rowan sat on Damien's other side, surrounded by folders of documentation and legal briefs that represented weeks of desperate preparation. The lawyers Damien had hired were the best money could buy, sharp-eyed and expensive, their suits worth more than Isla had earned in a year of cleaning floors. But even their confident demeanor couldn't hide the uphill battle they faced. Miranda sat across the chamber with her legal team, immaculate in a cream suit that made her look innocent and wronged. Her ice-blue eyes held calculated satisfaction as she watched Isla squirm under the council's scrutiny. The red mark from Isla's slap had faded, but Miranda had brought photographs, evidence of the unprovoked attack that she wielded like a weapon. The head council member was an ancient alpha named Castellan, silver-haired and steel-eyed, with a face carved from granite and a presence that commanded absolute attention. His voice carried the weight of centuries when he called the hearing to order. "We are here to review the custody arrangement of Thorn Frost and determine whether changes are warranted based on recent events and ongoing concerns raised by his mother, Miranda Frost Thornridge." His gray eyes swept the room, missing nothing. This council takes such matters with utmost seriousness. A child's future hangs in the balance. The first 2 hours were brutal. Miranda's lawyers called witness after witness, staff members from the mansion who Isla recognized with sinking dread. Mrs. Chin testified that Isla had been disruptive to household order and dismissive of established protocols. A gardener claimed he had seen Isla speaking, harshly, to Thorn, though Isla knew it was a lie. She had never raised her voice to the boy, never used anything but patience and kindness. Another maid suggested that Isla's influence was making Thorn, withdrawn from other shifters, isolated from his own kind, strange and unsettling in his behavior. Each testimony was carefully crafted, measured, designed to paint Isla as inappropriate and damaging without being obviously false. Every word was a nail in a coffin being built around her. Damien's lawyers cross-examined aggressively, but the damage was accumulating. The council members took notes with expressions that ranged from disapproving to openly hostile. Castellan's face remained impassive, but Isla could see the way his eyes lingered on her, assessing, judging, finding her lacking. Then came the video footage. Miranda's lawyer produced security recordings from the gala, carefully edited to show Isla's slap without the context of Miranda's vicious provocations. The sound had been muted, so the council couldn't hear what had been said. They only saw Isla striking Miranda across the face, saw the shock and fear on Miranda's features, and saw Damien's protective response. "As you can see," Miranda's lead attorney said smoothly, his voice dripping with false concern, "Miss Monroe displayed violent and unstable behavior in a public setting. This is the woman who has daily, unsupervised access to a vulnerable child. The woman who Alpha Frost has chosen to trust with his son's care and education." "That footage is deliberately misleading," Damien's lawyer objected, rising to his feet. "It removes all context of Mrs. Frost Thornridge's provocations, her deliberate attempts to elicit exactly this response." "The context is irrelevant," Miranda's attorney interrupted. "Violence is violence. Miss Monroe chose to respond with physical aggression rather than walking away or seeking assistance from security. This speaks directly to her character and her fitness to be around a child." Castellan raised his hand, silencing both sides. "We will review all evidence presented. Continue." Rowan presented their counter-evidence next, documentation of Thorne's progress under Isla's care. Psychological evaluations showing marked improvement in the boy's emotional state, his confidence, his social development. Educational assessments demonstrating advanced learning in multiple subjects. Testimonials from the few staff members brave enough to speak honestly about the transformation they'd witnessed in Thorne. Then came the recordings Rowan had obtained. Audio of Miranda speaking to Marcus, her voice clear and damning as she admitted she didn't want Thorne, that he was merely a means to maintain her financial settlement, that the child disgusted her with his defect. Your Honors, Miranda's lead lawyer stood smoothly before the recordings finished playing. We object strenuously to this evidence. These recordings were obtained without my client's knowledge or consent. They represent a clear violation of privacy and cannot be admitted in a proceeding of this nature under territorial law. Castellan frowned, conferring quietly with the other council members. The whispered conversation seemed to last an eternity. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with authority. The objection is sustained. While the content may be relevant to character assessment, the manner in which it was obtained violates established protocols regarding evidence gathering. The recordings will not be considered in our deliberations. Rowan's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. Isla felt hope slipping through her fingers like water, impossible to hold. Without that evidence, they had nothing concrete to counter Miranda's carefully constructed narrative of a violent, inappropriate human woman corrupting a shifter child. Then Thorne was called. Not to speak. He couldn't, would never be able to, but to present something he had prepared with Isla's help over the past week. Something neither Damien nor Rowan had known about until this morning. A court attendant brought forward a large portfolio, and Isla's breath caught as it was opened on a display easel positioned where everyone could see. The first series of drawings showed a small figure alone in a dark room, curled up, tiny, surrounded by shadows. The next showed the same figure with tears streaming down its face, larger figures in the background with their backs turned, walking away. More drawings depicted the boy hiding, crying, making himself small to avoid notice. The artwork was simple but heartbreaking, rendered with the honest skill of a child who had lived what he drew. Then the images changed. Color bloomed across the pages like sunrise. The same small figure now stood between two taller ones, their hands linked, forming a chain of connection. Sunlight poured through the drawings in shades of gold and amber. Smiles were sketched on all three faces, careful and clear. The final drawing showed three wolves running together under a full moon, one large and dark, one medium-sized with lighter fur, one small with gray coloring. Stars scattered above them like blessings, and beneath the image, Thorne had written in careful, childish handwriting. Before Isla, I was alone. Dad loved me but was too far away to reach. Mom said I was broken and wrong. Isla taught me I'm not broken, just different.
She taught Dad how to talk to me.
Now we're family. Please don't take her away. Please don't make me alone again. I love her. She loves me. That should matter more than what she is. The chamber fell completely silent. Isla pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face unchecked. Damien's hand found hers beneath the table, gripping tight enough to hurt, anchoring her. She saw Castellan's expression soften, just slightly, just enough to give her a flicker of hope. One of the female council members openly wiped at her eyes. Even some of Miranda's supporters looked uncomfortable, unable to see the raw honesty in a child's artwork. Miranda shifted in her seat, her perfect composure cracking at the edges. For just a moment, something that might have been shame flickered across her face before she smoothed it away. The child's testimony, unconventional as it is, will be considered, Castellan said quietly, his voice gentler than before. Is there anything else the defense wishes to present? One of Damien's lawyers stood, exchanging glances with Rowan. Isla saw something pass between them, a decision being made in real time. Your Honors, the lawyer said carefully, there is one more option we would like to address. An ancient provision of shifter law that could resolve many of the legal complications regarding Miss Monroe's status and her role in Thorne's life. Miranda leaned forward, interest sharpening her features like a blade. The lawyer continued, choosing his words with precision. Territorial law recognizes humans who have been transformed through mating bite as legally equivalent to born shifters. If Miss Monroe were to accept such a transformation from Alpha Frost, the primary objections regarding human influence would become legally moot. She would technically be a shifter, albeit a transformed one, and therefore qualified under all traditional standards to serve as guardian and, should Alpha Frost choose, as Luna to the territory.
No.
Damien's voice was hard, final, brooking no argument. We are not pursuing that option. Castellan raised his hand, silencing the immediate objections. Let the council finish, Alpha Frost. The lawyer nodded, continuing despite Damien's obvious fury. We understand this is considered an extreme measure. Transformed humans face significant social stigma within shifter society, often referred to as tainted blood or corrupted. However, from a purely legal standpoint, it would eliminate the foundation of Mrs. Frost Thornridge's custody challenge. It would make Miss Monroe. It would also make Clara a target for discrimination for the rest of her life. Damien interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. I will not subject her to that. I will not ask her to give up her humanity, to become something society will treat as lesser, just to win a legal battle. Castellan studied them both with ancient, knowing eyes. The lawyer council references is indeed valid, though it dates back to an era when transformations were more accepted within our society. Today, such individuals face considerable prejudice, as your lawyer noted. He paused, his gaze moving between Isla and Damien. However, the decision to pursue this path is not one for this council to mandate or forbid. It rests entirely with the individuals involved. He straightened in his chair, his voice carrying absolute authority. This council will deliberate on the custody matter for 7 days. We will reconvene at that time for a final hearing and decision. Until then, the current custody arrangement remains in effect, with the caveat that Miss Monroe's contact with young Thorn be supervised by Alpha Frost or Beta Rowan at all times. The gavel fell with a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber like a death knell. In the car ride home, Thorn sat between them, his small hand gripping Isla's tightly. He had been so brave, she thought. So much braver than most adults could have been. We're not doing it, Damien said again, his voice hard with finality. The transformation. I won't ask that of you. But if it's the only way to keep Thorn safe, Isla began. There has to be another option. Damien's hands clenched on the steering wheel hard enough that she heard the leather creak. I've spent my entire life watching people be judged for things beyond their control. Thorn for being mute. Transformed shifters for their origins.
I won't add you to that list.
I won't make you a target. Isla looked down at Thorn, who was watching them both with worried storm-gray eyes. She signed to him, keeping her movements where Damien could see in the rear-view mirror. Don't worry. Everything will be okay. Thorn signed back, his hands trembling slightly. I don't want you to leave. I don't want to lose you.
You're my mom now.
Not her.
You.
The word shattered something in Isla's chest. She pulled him close, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. You won't lose me. I promise. But she had no idea if she could keep that promise. The 7 days stretched ahead like an eternity. Each one brought them closer to a decision that would change everything, a choice between Isla's humanity and Thorn's future, between accepting discrimination or accepting defeat. On the 5th evening, Isla found Damien standing alone in his study, staring out the window at the darkening winter sky. Snow had begun to fall, coating the grounds in pristine white that looked peaceful and cold. She approached quietly, her heart heavy with the weight of what needed to be said. I've been thinking, she began softly. Don't. Damien's response was immediate, his voice tight. Don't even suggest it. Listen to me. Isla moved to stand beside him, their reflections ghostly in the window glass. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't quite belong anywhere. Miss Helena loved me at the group home, but I wasn't packed. I wasn't a shifter. I was always adjacent to your world, but never truly part of it. Always on the outside looking in, watching something I could never have. She turned to face him fully. Maybe this is my chance to finally belong somewhere completely. To be part of something instead of always being the outsider. To become family in a way that even your world's laws can't dispute. At what cost? Damien turned to her, anguish written across his features. His storm gray eyes had gone dark with emotion. You'll face hatred, Isla. Discrimination that will follow you everywhere. People will look at you as lesser, as contaminated. You'll carry that burden every single day for the rest of your life. And that life will be longer than you expect. Transformed shifters live as long as born ones. Centuries, potentially. Centuries of prejudice. I'll also carry the knowledge that I saved Thorn. Isla replied quietly. That I became part of your world in the only way a human can. That I chose this family completely and irrevocably. And maybe, just maybe, I can help change how transformed shifters are treated. Thorn's differences made him stronger once we embraced them. Maybe mine can too. Damien pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. She could feel him trembling. I don't deserve you, he whispered roughly. Neither of us do. You deserve someone who fights for you, Isla said against his chest, breathing in assent, pine and winter storms and home. And I'm fighting Damien. I'm choosing this. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you and Thorn are worth everything. Worth more than my humanity. Worth more than an easy life. Worth everything I am and everything I could become. Damien pulled back enough to cup her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers desperately. You're sure? Absolutely certain? Because once this is done, there's no going back. You'll be changed forever. Isla covered his hands with hers, holding his gaze steadily. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Transform me. Make me yours. Make me pack. Make me family in every way that matters. Isla has made her choice, but is Damien ready to make it a reality? The transformation will change everything. Her body, her life, her place in a world that already wants to reject her. And with only 2 days left before the final hearing, time is running out. Will love be enough to see them through what comes next? The point of no return awaits. Chapter 7. Moonfire Transformation. The 6th day of waiting dawned cold and clear, the winter sun turning the snow-covered grounds into a field of diamonds. Isla awoke before sunrise with her decision solidified in her chest like stone. Unshakable, absolute, terrifying in its finality. She found Damien already awake in his study, papers scattered across his desk that he wasn't really reading. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and worry, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. I'm doing it, she said without preamble, closing the door behind her. The transformation. Today. Damien's head snapped up, his storm gray eyes wide with shock and something that looked like fear. Isla, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She crossed the room to stand before him, her resolve unwavering. Not because I'm being forced, but because this is my choice. My family. I won't lose you or Thorn because I was too afraid to change. I won't let Miranda win because I chose comfort over courage. You'll face discrimination, Damien said roughly, standing to tower over her. His hands gripped the edge of his desk hard enough to make the wood creak. People will treat you as lesser. Tainted blood. Corrupted. Bad blood. Those words will follow you everywhere you go for the rest of your very long life. Every territory you visit, every pack gathering, every social event, they'll whisper behind your back. Some will refuse to acknowledge you at all. Let them. Isla's voice was steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. I've been called worthless before. I survived it. I'll survive this too. The difference is, this time I'll have you. I'll have Thorn. I'll have a family worth fighting for. Damien cupped her face with both hands, his touch achingly gentle despite the strength she could feel trembling in his fingers. You are the bravest person I've ever known, and I'm terrified of what I'm about to do to you. I'm terrified too, Isla admitted, covering his hands with hers. But I want this. All of it. The transformation, the bond, the claiming. I want to be yours permanently and irrevocably. I want to be back in every way that matters. Heat flooded Damien's eyes, turning them molten gold. If we do this, when we do this, we do it properly. The mating bite isn't just transformation. It's a bond that can never be broken. It means you're mine and I'm yours, tied together in ways that go beyond marriage or human understanding. Our wolves will recognize each other. Our souls will be linked. There's no divorce from a mating bond, no separation. It's forever, Isla. Literal forever. I know. Isla's voice didn't waver. I want that. I want you. I want this family. I want to belong to something bigger than myself.
Make me yours, Damien.
Completely. They gathered at sunset in the same clearing where Thorn had experienced his first shift, a place that had become sacred to their small family. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the approaching night bringing with it a sense of ceremony and finality that made Isla's skin prickle with awareness. The temperature had dropped significantly, the snow on the ground glittering in the dying light. Isla's breath misted in the cold air, visible proof of her humanity, for now. Rowan stood as witness, his expression solemn but supportive. Over the past months, he had come to respect Isla, to see her worth beyond her human origins. He would document the transformation, ensure it was legally recognized, and stand as proof that everything had been done properly. Thorn was there too, bundled in a warm coat, his storm gray eyes huge in his small face. He watched with a mixture of excitement and fear, understanding what was about to happen but not fully grasping the weight of it. Isla signed to him, her hands steady despite the trembling she felt inside. Don't be scared. This is what I want. You'll still have me after. I promise. I'll just be different on the outside. Thorn signed back, his movements careful and precise. Will it hurt? Isla couldn't lie to him. Probably. But you'll still have me when it's over. That's what matters. You're the bravest person I know, Thorn signed, and the simple faith in his expression nearly broke her resolve. Braver than any alpha. Braver than anyone. Damien stood before her in the fading light, and Isla had never seen him look more conflicted. Love and guilt warred in his expression, the desperate need to protect what was his against the horror of what he was about to do to her. Last chance to change your mind, he said quietly, his voice rough with barely controlled emotion. Once I bite you, once the venom enters your bloodstream, there's no stopping it. No going back. You'll either transform completely or what? Isla asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Or your body will reject the change and you'll die. Damien's voice was barely above a whisper. It's rare, maybe 1 in 100 transformations fails, but it happens. Usually when the human's body can't handle the stress of cellular restructuring. I could lose you, Isla. If this goes wrong, if your body can't adapt, I could lose you forever. Isla reached up to cup his face, her thumb tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Then find me again on the other side. Because I'm not changing my mind. Transform me, Damien. Make me yours. Make me pack. Make me a family. Something broke in Damien's expression, the last of his resistance crumbling. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair, breathing her in as if memorizing her scent while it was still purely human. I love you, he whispered against her temple. More than I thought possible. More than is probably wise. If this works, you'll be able to feel it, the bond between us. You'll know what I feel every time I look at you. I already know, Isla whispered back. I feel it too. I've felt it for months. This just makes it official. Damien shifted partially, a change that was both beautiful and terrifying to witness. His canines elongated into deadly fangs designed to tear flesh, to inject the venom that would rewrite her DNA. His eyes blazed pure gold, his wolf rising to the surface. Isla tilted her head, exposing the vulnerable column of her throat in a gesture of absolute trust. Her pulse jumped visibly beneath her pale skin, her heartbeat thundering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. She saw Thorn take Rowan's hand, seeking comfort and reassurance. Saw the beta squeeze gently, offering silent support to the boy who was about to watch his chosen mother transform into something other than human. Damien's breath was hot against her skin as he positioned himself carefully. His hands gripped her shoulders, gentle but unyielding, ready to hold her upright when her legs inevitably gave out. "I love you," he whispered one more time. "Hold on to that. When the pain comes, when it feels like you're dying, hold on to that. Hold on to me, to Thorn, to what we're building together." "Always," Isla breathed. Then he bit down. Pain exploded through Isla's body like wildfire, white-hot and all-consuming, racing through her veins with vicious intensity. It felt like every cell was being torn apart and remade simultaneously, like her bones were shattering and reforming, like her blood had turned to liquid lightning that burned through her from the inside out. She screamed. Couldn't help it, couldn't stop it. The sound tore from her throat raw and agonized, echoing through the clearing and into the winter night. Distantly, she heard Thorn's frightened cry, heard Rowan's calm voice trying to reassure the boy, explaining that this was normal, that Isla would be okay, that the pain was necessary for the change to take hold. Damien's arms were iron bands around her, holding her upright as her legs gave out. His venom spread through her system like poison and promise combined, foreign magic forcing its way into her DNA, rewriting everything she was on the most fundamental level. Isla felt her human self fighting it. Her body was desperately trying to reject the transformation, to expel the invading substance that was changing her from the inside out. Her immune system waged war against the venom, and she was the battlefield. But Damien's presence anchored her. His scent, pine and winter storms and something wild, grounded her even as everything else fell apart. She clung to it, to him, to the promise of what lay on the other side of this agony. Time lost all meaning. Isla was only dimly aware of being carried inside, of being laid on soft sheets in Damien's private chambers. The transformation wasn't instant. It would take days for her body to fully change, for her human cells to give way to something new and other. The first 3 nights were the worst. Fever burned through her veins like she was being consumed from within. Delirium twisted her dreams into nightmarish shapes, wolves with too many teeth, forests that swallowed her whole, moonlight that cut like broken glass. She was dying and being reborn simultaneously, caught in a liminal space between human and shifter, where she was neither and both. Damien never left her side. She would surface briefly from the fever to find him there, cooling her brow with trembling hands, his storm-gray eyes dark with fear and guilt. He murmured words she couldn't quite understand, his voice a constant anchor in the chaos of transformation. Thorn visited when she was lucid enough to recognize him. His small face would appear above hers, creased with worry, his hands moving in signs she could barely focus on. "Are you dying?" he would ask, his movements jerky with fear. "No," Damien would sign back, though his scent carried the sharp tang of terror. "She's becoming. It's different.
She's going to be okay."
She has to be okay. The second day brought changes Isla could feel even through the fever. Her senses sharpened until the world became overwhelming. She could smell everything. The fabric of the sheets, the wood of the furniture, Damien's fear mixing with his love, Thorn's anxiety bleeding through the door even when he wasn't in the room. Sounds that had been background noise became distinct and clear. The house settling, whined through bare branches outside, conversations happening floors away, heartbeats of everyone nearby creating a symphony of life. Her body ached as bones shifted subtly beneath her skin, preparing for transformations to come. She could feel something new taking root inside her, a presence that had never been there before, foreign and familiar all at once. Her wolf. Still sleeping, still forming, but undeniably real. The third day, the fever finally broke. Isla woke clear-headed for the first time since the bite, her body weak but functional. Damien was asleep in a chair beside the bed, his hand still clutching hers even in unconsciousness. He looked haggard, days of stubble darkening his jaw, shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights spent keeping vigil. She studied his face, memorizing every line, every angle. This man who had given her everything, who had transformed her not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. who had shown her what it meant to belong. "You're awake," Damien said softly, his eyes opening to meet hers. Relief flooded his features, so profound it made her chest ache. "You're really awake. How do you feel?" "Different," Isla replied, her voice rough from screaming and fever. "Everything is more sharper, clearer, overwhelming. That's normal. Your enhanced senses will take time to adjust to." Damien moved to sit on the edge of the bed, his hand rising to cup her face with infinite gentleness. "Isla, you did it. You survived the transformation. You're going to be okay. When will I be able to shift?" The question felt important somehow, urgent.
Soon.
"The next full moon will call to you. That's 3 weeks away. Your wolf is still forming, still integrating with your human consciousness. We'll guide you through it when the time comes. I'll teach you everything you need to know." Isla sat up slowly, testing her body. She felt strange, familiar, and foreign all at once. The same person in a fundamentally different package. And deep inside, she felt it. The bond Damien had warned her about. A connection that linked her to him on a level that went beyond physical or emotional. She could sense him now, his relief, his love, his lingering fear that something might still go wrong. "I can feel you," she whispered, wondering about coloring her voice. "Inside me. Like you're part of me now." The mating bond. Damien's smile was beautiful despite his exhaustion. "It goes both ways. I feel you too. Your courage. Your determination. Your love for Thorn," and he paused, his eyes going soft. "Your love for me. Always," Isla promised, and leaned forward to kiss him, sealing the transformation with touch, with connection, with a promise of forever. The 8th day arrived with gray skies that threatened more snow. Isla dressed carefully in a formal suit, her hands steadier than she'd expected. The transformation was complete now. She could feel it in the way her body hummed with new energy, in the heightened awareness of everything around her. She could smell the nervous energy coming from everyone in the house. Damien's determination. Rowan's cautious optimism. Thorn's hopeful fear. The council chamber felt different this time through her enhanced senses. Isla picked up details she'd missed before. The scent of old wood and older power, the subtle sounds of breathing and heartbeats from the council members, the way air currents moved through the vaulted space, carrying information she was still learning to interpret. Miranda's shock when Isla entered was palpable. Her ice-blue eyes widened, her perfect composure cracking as she realized what Isla had done. What Isla had become. "Impossible," Miranda breathed, the word barely audible. But Isla's enhanced hearing caught it clearly. Castellan called the hearing to order, his steel-gray eyes moving between Isla and Damien with new assessment. "We understand there have been significant developments since our last meeting. My client has undergone transformation," one of Damien's lawyers said formally, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "As of 6 days ago, Isla Monroe became Isla Frost through a mating bite. She is now legally recognized as a shifter under ancient territorial law. The primary objections to her presence in Thorn's life have been eliminated." Miranda's lawyer stood quickly, his movement sharp with desperation. "This is a transparent manipulation of the system, Your Honors. She's still fundamentally human regardless of what she's done to her body. The transformation doesn't change who she was or where she came from. She's tainted blood now, corrupted. If anything, this makes her less suitable, not more." "The law is clear," Castellan said, his voice carrying absolute authority that silenced all objections. "A human transformed through mating bite is legally equivalent to a born shifter in all matters of territorial law, pack standing, and custodial rights. Isla Frost is now recognized as a member of the shifter community with all attendant rights and responsibilities. The objections regarding human influence are therefore moot under our legal framework. But the social implications," Miranda's lawyer tried to continue, "are not grounds for custody removal," Castellan interrupted firmly. "This council does not base its decisions on social prejudices, regardless of how widespread they may be. We base them on legal standing and the welfare of the child in question." Miranda's face twisted with fury and desperation. This is absurd. She's corrupted. Bad blood. She'll poison my son with her. Your son? Damien interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. The entire chamber fell silent. Has been thriving under Isla's care. The council has seen the evidence. Thorn is happier, healthier, more confident than he has been in his entire life. That is what matters here. Not your financial interest in maintaining custody. Not your prejudices. Not your wounded pride. Thorn's well-being. Nothing else. Castellan consulted with the other council members in low voices, a conversation that seemed to last an eternity. Finally, he spoke, his words falling like hammer blows. Based on all testimony, evidence, and legal standing presented to this council, we grant full and permanent custody of Thorn Frost to his father, Alpha Damien Frost. Miranda Frost Thornridge's parental rights are hereby terminated based on demonstrated emotional neglect, financial motivations superseding child welfare, and failure to provide appropriate care for a child with specialized communication needs. The gavel fell with finality. This decision is permanent and binding. Mrs. Frost Thornridge is prohibited from contacting Thorn Frost without explicit written permission from Alpha Frost. Any violation will result in criminal charges. This hearing is adjourned. Isla felt tears stream down her face as Damien pulled her into his arms. They had won. Thorn was safe. Their family was protected. Miranda's scream of rage echoed through the chamber, but it was the sound of a defeated predator, all fury and no power. You can't do this. I have rights. That creature has no business raising my son. The decision stands, Castellan said coldly, his ancient eyes holding no sympathy. Remove her. Guards moved forward, escorting a still screaming Miranda from the chamber. Her fury followed them out like a wake of poison, but it couldn't touch them anymore. Couldn't hurt them. Couldn't threaten what they had built. They were escorted from the building through formal corridors. Isla was still processing, still trying to believe it was really over, when Miranda appeared from a side hallway, having evaded her escorts in one final act of desperation. You think you've won? Miranda snarled, her ice-blue eyes wild with rage. You think becoming a shifter makes you worthy? You're nothing but a human playing dress-up in a world that will never accept you. I'll make sure everyone knows what you are, tainted, corrupted, lesser. She lunged at Isla with supernatural speed, claws extended, face twisted with hatred. Instinct took over. Isla's body moved before her mind caught up, blocking the attack with speed she didn't know she possessed, countering with force that sent Miranda sprawling across the marble floor. Her wolf rose close to the surface for the first time, lending her strength and reflexes she was still learning to control. Isla stood over Miranda, breathing hard, her own hands tingling with the promise of claws that hadn't yet emerged. Touch me again, she said quietly, her voice carrying an edge of command she'd learned from Damien, and you'll regret it. I'm not the frightened human you thought you could bully anymore. I'm back now. I'm Luna, and I will protect my family from anyone who threatens them, including you. Guards rushed forward, pulling Miranda to her feet. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her expression stunned. She had expected Isla to be weak, unprepared, easy to hurt. Instead, she'd found someone who could defend herself. Someone who had become everything Miranda feared most, a true threat to her control. Castellan appeared in the hallway, his expression thunderous. Miranda Frost Thornridge, you have now committed assault on council property against a recognized Pack Luna. You are hereby banned from this territory permanently and stripped of all remaining legal connections to the Frost family. If you attempt any contact with Thorn Frost, Alpha Damien Frost, or Luna Isla Frost, you will face immediate criminal prosecution. Remove her. Now. Miranda was dragged away, still screaming threats and curses, but her power was broken.
Shattered. Gone.
Outside the council building, Rowan was waiting with Thorn. The boy saw them emerge and ran forward, throwing himself into Isla's arms with such force she stumbled. She held him tight, breathing in his familiar scent, now enhanced by her shifter senses until she could detect every nuance of his emotions. Relief.
Joy.
Love so pure it made her chest ache. "You're okay." Thorne signed frantically when he pulled back enough to move his hands. "You're really okay. And she can't take me away. Ever." "Never." Isla signed back, her vision blurred with tears. "You're stuck with me now. Forever. I'm yours and you're mine, and nothing will ever change that." Thorne buried his face in her shoulder and cried, but they were tears of relief and happiness. Damien wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stood there in the winter afternoon, a family finally complete and safe and protected by law. No one could separate them now. No one could take away what they had built. They were packed. They were family. They were forever. The transformation is complete, and the battle is won. But what does life look like now for Isla as she learns to navigate her new reality as a shifter and as Luna to Damien's territory? The prejudices are real, but so is the love. And together, this family will forge a new path forward. One final chapter remains. Chapter 8. Home Under Winter Stars. 8 months had passed since the council's decision, and the world had transformed in ways both profound and subtle. Not just Isla's body, though that too had changed in ways she was still discovering. Her wolf had emerged during the first full moon after her transformation, smaller than most but swift and graceful, with fur the color of burnished copper that caught moonlight like fire. Storm gray eyes remained even in wolf form, a remnant of her human self that marked her as different, as other, as transformed. Damien had run beside her that night, teaching her to embrace the freedom of 4 legs instead of 2. The joy of wind in her fur and earth beneath her paws. The primal satisfaction of hunting together, of moving as one unit with her mate. But the deeper transformation was in how she moved through the shifter world now. No longer an outsider looking in, but a member, however controversial her path to membership had been. The discrimination Damien had warned about was real and constant. Isla heard the whispers wherever she went, saw the disdainful looks from traditionalist shifters who viewed transformed humans as corrupted. Tainted blood, they called her. Bad blood. Lesser. Contaminated. The word stung, but she had learned to wear them like armor. Every time someone tried to diminish her, she thought of Thorne's smile, of Damien's love, of the family she had fought so hard to keep. And slowly, grudgingly, some minds began to change. The wedding took place on a crisp February morning, exactly 1 year after Isla had first signed to a crying boy in a playroom. The estate gardens had been transformed into something magical. White roses climbed trellises despite the winter cold, a gift from a friendly pack who specialized in botanical magic. Fairy lights hung from bare tree branches, twinkling in the pale sunlight. Chairs arranged in neat rows faced an arbor woven with evergreen branches and silver ribbons. The guest list was carefully curated. Pack members who had come to respect Isla despite her origins. A few shifters from neighboring territories who were curious about the alpha who had chosen a transformed mate. And most importantly, the families from Isla's new project. That project had started 3 months after the custody battle, when Isla had approached the Territorial Community Center with a proposal. A program to teach American Sign Language to shifter families who had children with communication difficulties. To create resources for those who felt lost and alone in a world that expected perfection. She had expected resistance, had braced for rejection. Instead, she found desperate parents who had been struggling in silence. Children who felt isolated within their own packs. Families are grateful for any help, any understanding, any recognition that their children were valuable despite being different. The program grew quickly. Word spread through the shifter community that there was a place where differences were celebrated, where children who didn't fit traditional molds could learn to thrive. Isla taught classes twice a week, training other shifters to become ASL interpreters, creating a network of support that hadn't existed before. One of her most dedicated students had been a young she-wolf named Ember, a teacher by training who specialized in working with children who had developmental differences. Rowan had been helping Isla set up the program's legal structure when Ember walked into a planning meeting, and the connection between them had been immediate and obvious. Rowan's normally serious expression softened whenever Ember laughed. Her gentle nature balanced his intensity perfectly. The way they moved around each other with unconscious synchronicity that spoke of something deeper than simple attraction. Now, as Isla stood in the bride's preparation room at the estate, Amber helped adjust her veil with capable hands. The dress was simple but elegant, cream silk that fell in soft waves, with delicate beading across the bodice that caught the light. Nothing too elaborate. Nothing that screamed for attention. Just beautiful and right. "You look perfect," Amber signed, her movements fluid and natural. She had taken to ASL with remarkable speed, her teacher's mind absorbing the language like a sponge. "Thank you," Isla signed back, then smiled warmly. "For everything. Not just this, but for the program. For believing in it. For helping build something that matters." "You gave me something to believe in," Amber replied, her amber eyes warm. "You showed all of us that being different doesn't mean being less. That strength comes in many forms. That love matters more than bloodlines or traditions." A knock at the door announced Thorne's arrival. He burst in wearing a tiny suit that made him look impossibly grown up despite only being 8 years old. His dark hair was carefully combed for once, and in his hands, he carried a small pillow with 2 rings tied to it with silver ribbon. "Ready," he signed to Isla, bouncing slightly with barely contained excitement. "This is important. I'm the ring bearer. It's a very serious job." Isla knelt before him, adjusting his collar with gentle fingers even though it was already perfect. "Are you ready? Have you been practicing not dropping them?" "Dad made me practice 17 times, Thorne signed, his expression solemn but his eyes dancing with mischief. "I won't drop them."
Probably.
"Maybe. I'll try really hard." "That's all I ask," Isla signed, laughing silently at his honesty. Damien appeared in the doorway, devastating in a charcoal gray suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and the storm gray intensity of his eyes. Those eyes found Isla and went molten gold, his scent shifting to something heated that made her wolf perk up with interest even through her nerves. "Everyone out," he said quietly, his voice carrying alpha command that had Ember and the other attendants filing out quickly, knowing better than to argue. Thorne hesitated, looking between them with knowing eyes far too old for his age. Then he grinned and followed the others, closing the door behind him with an exaggerated wink that made Isla want to laugh and cry simultaneously. The moment they were alone, Damien crossed the room and pulled Isla into his arms. Having second thoughts, he murmured against her hair, breathing her in. "About you?" Isla tilted her head back to meet his gaze, her hands fisting in his jacket. "Never. Not for a single second." "About the ceremony? About standing in front of everyone and officially becoming Luna? About accepting a position that will make you a target for every traditionalist who thinks transformed shifters shouldn't hold positions of power?" "I've been a target since the moment I signed to Thorne," Isla said softly. "This just makes it official. And honestly, I'm tired of hiding. Tired of pretending I don't belong. Tired of letting people like Miranda dictate who gets to be family and who doesn't." She pulled back enough to cup his face, her thumb tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I want to stand beside you as your equal. I want to be the Luna this territory deserves, one who fights for those who are different, who creates space for families like ours, who proves that love and choice matter more than bloodlines and tradition." "You already are all of those things," Damien said roughly, his eyes bright with emotion. "You've changed this entire territory in 8 months. Changed how people think about differences, about what makes someone valuable. You've given hope to families who thought they were alone." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I am the luckiest alpha who ever lived. And in about 20 minutes, I get to stand in front of everyone who matters and claim you as mine for all the world to see." "Yours," Isla echoed, the words of promise and a prayer. "Always yours. Forever," Damien promised, and kissed her with gentle passion that made her forget about the ceremony waiting, about the people gathered outside, about everything except the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. The ceremony was simple, but profound in its meaning. Isla walked down the aisle alone. needing no one to give her away because she was choosing this freely, completely. She had given herself to this family, to this life, and no one could claim credit for that choice except her. Thorn preceded her, carrying the rings with solemn concentration. His small face was serious as he walked, clearly taking his role with utmost importance. But when he reached the arbor where Damien waited, he couldn't help but grin and sign quickly, "Don't cry, Dad. You promised you wouldn't cry." Damien's lips twitched, fighting a smile. "No promises. Your mom looks beautiful." "Your mom, not my companion or my tutor." The casual claim of relationship made Isla's throat tight with emotion. When she reached them, Thorn stepped between his parents, looking up at both of them with such pure joy that several guests openly wept. He signed quickly, his hands moving with practiced ease. "My family. Together. Finally complete." The officiant was Elder Castellan himself, a surprising choice that spoke volumes about how far Isla's reputation had risen. The ancient alpha, who had once judged her, now stood ready to bind her to Damien in the eyes of shifter law and tradition. He spoke about bonds that transcended blood, about families formed through choice and courage rather than genetics, about strength found in accepting rather than rejecting those who were different, about love being the foundation of the pack, not prejudice. His words carried weight, and Isla saw more than one traditionalist shifter in the audience, shifting uncomfortably, reconsidering old beliefs. When it came time for vows, Damien spoke first. His voice was steady, but rough with emotion that he didn't try to hide. "Isla, you came into my life when I had forgotten how to be anything but an alpha. When I had built walls so high around my heart that I thought nothing could scale them. You reminded me how to be a father, a man, someone capable of love rather than just duty." His storm-gray eyes held hers with burning intensity. "You saw my son's value when others saw only a deficit. You chose us again and again, even when it cost you everything you were. You sacrificed your humanity to save our family. You face discrimination daily with grace and courage that humbles me." He reached for her hands, gripping them tightly. "I vow to spend my life being worthy of that sacrifice. To love you with everything I am. To stand beside you as we build a territory where everyone belongs, where being different is celebrated instead of condemned. To protect you and Thorn with my last breath. To never let you forget how remarkable you are." Isla's voice shook when she spoke, but held firm. "Damien, you gave me a home when I had only ever been an outsider. You saw strength in me I didn't know existed. You trusted me with your son's care and his heart when you had every reason to keep him protected from the world." Tears streamed down her face unchecked. "I vow to stand beside you through every challenge. To be the Luna this territory deserves, one who fights for the forgotten, the different, the ones who don't fit society's molds. To love you and Thorn with everything I am and everything I've become." She squeezed his hands. "I vow to never stop fighting for families like ours, for children like Thorn, for a world where transformation, whether physical or social, is seen as strength rather than corruption, where love matters more than bloodlines, where home is something you build, not something you're born into." They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that caught the winter sunlight. No elaborate engravings, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Just solid, enduring symbols of commitment that would last centuries. When Castellan pronounced them married and mated before witnesses and pack law, when Damien kissed her with passion and promise while their guests erupted in applause, Isla felt complete in a way she never had as a human. The reception was joyful and surprisingly warm. The families from Isla's program approached her with gratitude, sharing stories of how the resources she'd created had changed their lives. Several traditional pack members who had initially opposed her position made quiet apologies, admitting they had been wrong about her worth. Not everyone was convinced. Some still looked at her with disdain, still whispered, "Tainted blood," when they thought she couldn't hear. But their numbers were shrinking, their influence waning. Change was slow, but it was happening. As the sun set and guests began to depart, Isla found herself in the garden with Damien and Thorn. The three of them alone under the emerging stars, the sounds of celebration fading behind them. The moon was rising, nearly full, calling to the wolves inside, all of them. "Wanna run?" Damien signed to Thorn, his eyes already flashing gold with anticipation. Thorn's enthusiastic nodding answered for both of them. They shifted together, the transformation as natural as breathing now. Isla's copper wolf shook out her fur, stretching in pleasure. Damien's massive midnight wolf nuzzled her gently, and Thorn's smaller gray wolf bounded circles around them both, his tail wagging with pure joy. They ran through the estate's extensive grounds, three wolves moving as one unit. The night air was cold and perfect, carrying scents of snow and pine and growing things waiting for spring. Small prey animals scattered at their approach. Ice crunched beneath their paws. Isla's wolf reveled in the freedom, in the strength of her transformed body, in the rightness of running beside her mate and son under winter stars. They reached a clearing at the edge of the property and stopped, panting happily. The moon hung above them, luminous and watching, a silent witness to what they had become. Thorn shifted partially, enough to use his paws in the adapted sign language they had developed for wolf form. Simplified gestures made with paws and body language. He signed by pawing the snow and positioning his body. Family. Home. Love. Forever. Damien's wolf moved closer to Isla's, his larger body sheltering hers. Thorn pressed between them, safe and warm in the protection of his parents. And together, as one, they lifted their muzzles and howled. The sound echoed through the night, carrying across the territory and beyond. A declaration of belonging, of unity,
of joy,
of family forged through choice and courage rather than blood and tradition. Other wolves answered from a distance, the pack responding to their alpha's call, acknowledging their Luna, celebrating the family that had fought so hard to exist. As the howl faded into the winter night, Isla felt tears prick her eyes, even in wolf form. She had lost her humanity, yes. The DNA that had defined her for 24 years was gone, replaced by something else. That loss was real, and sometimes she mourned it in quiet moments. But what she had gained was immeasurable. She had a mate who loved her with fierce devotion, a son who looked at her with absolute trust and called her mom in every way that mattered, a pack that was slowly learning to accept her. A purpose in helping other families navigate the challenges of raising different children. A home, not just a house, but true belonging that sank into her bones and settled her restless heart. She was Isla Frost now, Luna of the Frost territory, mother to a brilliant, brave boy who communicated with his hands instead of his voice. Wife to an alpha who had chosen love over tradition, family over status. Teacher to families who desperately needed someone to see their children's potential. Advocate for those who were different, who didn't fit society's narrow definitions of acceptable. She was a transformed shifter, yes, with all the discrimination and prejudice that label carried. But she was also proof that transformation, whether physical or social, was possible. That mindset could change. That family came in many forms. That love was stronger than tradition, courage was stronger than fear, and choice was stronger than destiny. The three wolves turned as one and ran back toward the mansion, toward home. Behind them, the moon watched with approval, and ahead, warm lights promised safety and belonging. Isla's copper wolf ran between her two favorite beings in the world, her heart full to bursting, and thought that this wild, strange, beautiful life was worth every sacrifice she had made. She was home. Finally, completely, perfectly home. And as dawn approached and they shifted back to human form, as Damien pulled her and Thorn into his arms on the frost-covered grass, Isla knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Because some things were worth fighting for. Some families were worth any price. And some loves transcended every boundary, even the one between human and wolf. Spring's promise. 3 years later, Isla stood in the community center she had founded, watching a room full of families learn to communicate with their children who were different. A father signed patiently to his daughter who had been born deaf, his large hands gentle as they formed the shapes she needed to understand him. A mother practiced with her son who had selective mutism, tears streaming down her face as he signed back for the first time in months. A young shifter couple learned alongside their child who had been injured and lost his voice, all three of them laughing as they made mistakes and tried again. Ember taught at the front of the room, her voice clear and encouraging, Rowan standing beside her, no longer just Beta, but her mate now, bonded and devoted. They worked together seamlessly, creating space for families to heal and grow. Thorn was there too, now 11 years old and thriving. He helped the younger children with their signs, his patience and kindness, making him a natural teacher. He had grown into his role as future alpha with quiet confidence, showing leadership through compassion rather than dominance. And beside Isla, one hand resting on her rounded belly, Damien watched with pride written across his face. Their daughter would be born in summer, a child of choice and love, who would grow up in a world slightly better than the one Isla had entered. A world where being different was celebrated, where families came in many forms, where love mattered more than bloodlines. "Thank you," a mother whispered to Isla as the class ended, clutching her son's hand. "Thank you for seeing us, for creating this space, for showing us that our family isn't broken, just different." "You are never broken," Isla replied softly, signing as she spoke so the boy could understand. "You were always perfect. You just needed someone to speak your language." As the families filed out and the center emptied, Isla stood in the quiet space and felt overwhelming gratitude for the path that had led her here. From a frightened maid scrubbing floors, to a companion who learned to love, to a Luna who fought for change, to a mother who would raise children to believe that difference was beautiful and love was stronger than fear. The journey had been hard. The costs had been real. But standing here, with Damien's arms around her and their children's future bright before them, Isla knew that every tear, every sacrifice, every moment of pain had been worth it. She was home. And home was wherever her family was, wherever love was stronger than tradition, wherever courage defeated prejudice, wherever hearts could heal and grow. Forever home. The end. Silent Bonds, a Wolf Heart Tales original. Thank you for listening to this journey of love, transformation, and the courage to choose family over everything else. Remember, being different doesn't mean being broken. It means being brave enough to be exactly who you are. Until the next moonrise.